This episode 355 with Mr. Jon Beckenhauer, who was a pilot in Vietnam, and he was just saying that I need to get a checklist like a pilot for this podcast. And apparently, and he was saying that as I realized I wasn't even recording. So, yeah, microphone, maybe, yeah, right, check. Double lights, check. Big light on in the room, check. What else would it be? Brightness up, make sure you're recording, check. Can they hear me? Check. And then finally, yeah, you flip on the engines and you start playing Fortunate Son. I think that's about the size of it, right?
That is close. Well, did you dial up the person you're interviewing, you know?
Oh, that's true. Well, you know, not only were you, for everybody listening, not only were you a pilot, but you're also in the White House Communications Agency, so I mean, you really know what you're talking about.
Oh, hell yeah.
So that,
yeah, right.
But that was, so Mr. Beckenhauer texted me on January 20th or the day after or whatever, right after the inauguration. And that was your friend sanitizing the podium, right, for President-elect Biden or President Biden.
Yeah. Well, I haven't seen him in 15 years, but he's still, I was surprised he's still doing the same job.
Yeah. But, yeah, because I saw a meme of that going around, and it was just like, you know, whatever it is, do it to your best, and even if you're just wiping the podium. But then you text me, you're like, hey, that's my friend. And I was like, what the fuck? But
did you get a hold of him? Did he agree to come on with you?
Oh, no, I could never get a hold of him. I know. Yeah. You did put me in touch with Chance, a guy that works in a nuclear missile silo. And I think I told you, he said, he was like, yeah, I'd love to. I talked to him on the phone like 3 weeks ago. But then he got back to me and was like, Global Strike Command or Strategic Air Command has to like approve it first. And I was thinking, well, shit, they need to make sure that I'm not some national security threat. It doesn't help that I went to D.C. on the 6th. But also, I realized, I was like, well, hold on. Nuclear triad, right? Silos, submarines, and bombers. I have had on Brigadier General Robert Spalding, who flew B-2 Spirits, which are nuclear-capable stealth bombers. Yeah. So I sent that to him, and I was like, for what it's worth, I have had on someone from the nuclear triad. And he laughed, but he's trying to get it to go through. But I'm so excited about that. If I can get him on, I am so excited about that.
Yeah. It's just a matter of going through the right wickets. You'll get him on. It's just a matter of getting a guy to sit down there with him. It's actually, if you can get both guys to sit there and interview them both. I don't know if you ever do two at the same time. But if you can get both of them on at the same time and interview them, actually, if you can get his boss on, you'll get a really good interview, I would think.
That would be amazing.
Yeah.
I've done also, that. Yeah.
I haven't talked to him yet, but I'm sure he'll agree to it. A submariner. Have you ever interviewed one of those yet?
I have not.
This guy is he just retired, so he could probably give you a lot of scoop on what it's like to be. He's a medic. He's a Navy medic, and so he's been on numerous underground or underwater expeditions, so on the sub. So he can. I was talking to him over Christmas, and he can tell you all kinds of wild stories, what goes on down there, the things they do.
That would be insane. Within what he can tell. Yeah, that would be insane. That's a whole different level of insanity. Being in a pressurized tube. No, I couldn't. I
couldn't do it.
I think I'd snap. I think I'd have an anxiety attack. It wouldn't be anxiety from the nuclear reactor engine or the nuclear-tipped missiles. It would be being in a tube under. At the same time, though, I bet they've got that so down pat, right? It's not the 50s anymore. It's not the 60s where every once in a while you lose a sub. I bet they've got that thing so down pat. I don't know.
Well, with the technology they got these days, everything computerized on there. The simulators, those guys are so trained and they get so much experience that you take a couple $1 billion worth of equipment out there, you're the deadliest weapon there is
on the planet.
in inventory anywhere.
Yeah,
they don't send anybody out in those things, and
very
the captain on board he's got an unbelievable.
He's got to be as reliable. Yeah, I realized that because I've talked to like drone pilots who I've had on. Actually, tomorrow I'm having on 2 more drone pilots who are some of the original episodes I've had on here. But I've had them on, and they're obviously respectable guys, right? But we goof around. But I realized when I had on Spalding, it wasn't this whole, right? When you talk to the drone guys, you kind of get that like a watered down, you get sort of the fighter jock vibe a little bit, which I love. I know that's what I would be. I would be that asshole. But talking to Spalding was like, talking to those two was like talking to like teenage sons, and talking to Spalding was like talking to the father. You realize, you're like, oh, the guys they put in the B-2 Spirits aren't Tom Cruise. These are guys that, I mean, they are as high up as you get. That's a $2 billion plane. And I can only imagine being in a nuclear submarine with 16 SLBMs, each one with 10 independent reentry vehicles, each one of those 100 to 200 kilotons. When you're in that tube with more destructive power than World War II. Yeah, I mean, I guess you're right. You probably don't have idiots like me out there. Right?
Or anybody trigger happy either.
No, not at all. No, you don't. That's got to be crazy though.
I see you put your jacket on. Are you in a unheated room, or what's the deal? Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so this room is above the garage. It gets really cold in the winter. The laptop I have, the laptop I have is for like image editing, like graphic design, and I've been using it for podcasting. So I'm putting it through the ringer every day. It's editing hours and hours of HD video. Long story short, I keep it in this room because it's super cold, and I have a fan next to it, and I blow the fan over it when I'm editing, and it's a heat sink, right? I mean, again, kind of like a nuclear submarine in the ocean, right? They have that infinite heat sink around them, and that's why they can just use that forever. But yeah, I also just love the cold. I just love it. I would rather be in a jacket and a sweatshirt every day of my life.
Well, I'd invite you to come out here. It's, I think, 15 below zero here right now.
That's insane.
I think it's coming your way, too.
Really?
It's coming your way. Yeah, right. So,
is it? Is there a storm coming this way?
Below zero and about 28 inches of snow on the ground here right now. So
I'm one of the few people in the world that I hear that, and that sounds beautiful. I love that.
Come on.
I might come out there, man. I might come out there. We'll go out and we can do a Doctor Strangelove episode. We can actually go out to a nuclear missile silo.
Yeah, Rock Hudson made a movie of the submarine up on the North Pole. Remember?
Mm-hmm.
I remember watching it coming back from a flight from Australia one time. So
that's Didn't Eisenhower take Gorbachev? Was it Gorbachev or Khrushchev or whoever? And then he kind of to show off American power during a visit. They watched a live feed from a news or on a TV from a nuclear sub breaking through the ice at the North Pole. Just kind of like flex power. They're like, hey, look at this little toy we got. Yeah. I've read Raven Rock by Garrett Graff. It's one of my favorite, but you might actually really like it. Raven Rock by Garrett Graff, all about, I think we talked about it last time. It's all about the nuclear bunkers and stuff. And I've been currently reading War State by Michael Swanson, all about the military-industrial complex. Really good. Really, I mean, when I say read, I mean listen on Audible. Really good book. That author is going to come on, I think this went like 2 days from now. But in both those books, Raven Rock by Garrett Graff and War State by Michael Swanson, I can email them to you if you'd like. Yeah, they're really good. But both of them, they talk about this one time where Eisenhower met with Kennedy on like January 19th, like the day before he's inaugurated, kind of, bestow a little bit of knowledge. And Eisenhower, who led the largest amphibious invasion in world history, 5-star general, won World War II, kept the Cold War cold, president, he met with Kennedy, who he didn't in his own words, didn't have a lot of respect for. Thought he was too young, thought he was too liberal, thought he was too idyllic. But he met with him and was basically telling him, in Kennedy's words, I think he liked talking down to me. And I think he liked, he said he received the tongue lashing of a lifetime, and he thinks Eisenhower enjoyed telling me just how dire the Cold War was. And to really get his point across, Eisenhower apparently walked behind the desk at the Oval Office and said, watch this. He said, like, we're always on a, is that light blinking? He said, we're always on, like, a hair trigger. And Kennedy was like, sure. And Eisenhower was like, no, like, it's a nonstop war footing. There's no more peacetime. And he picked up the phone, and he just said, Opal 3. And he said within minutes, a Marine helicopter landed on the right behind him, and 2 guards come up, and it's a, you know, it's obviously a drill, but we're whisking you away to a secure location. And then Eisenhower kind of waved him off, and he was like, at any time, at any moment, any second of the day, these guys are going to grab you, they're going to throw you on a helicopter, and unless it's your wife or kids with you, armed men are going to keep anyone else from getting on that. Doesn't matter if it's your secretary, they'll shoot them. It's insane, man.
Insane.
That whole world of just, really, yeah, that's just so interesting to me. The constant war footing that has existed really since the Soviets got their nuclear bomb.
Yeah, it changed everything.
Absolutely insane. Did you ever have any in your history as a pilot? Did you have any interaction or around nuclear weapons? Did you ever see or hear anything? Because they didn't. Well, they kind of wanted to use them in Vietnam, right?
Not that I'm aware of. I mean, we were so out. We had so outclassed them with any weaponry we had until the Soviets started bringing in their surface-to-air missiles. Mm-hmm. In the South Vietnam, the most sophisticated thing they ever had was basically the shoulder-fired grenade launcher that was shot against us. Bill Albright probably told you they got shot at with some artillery from across the Cambodian border once, but there was no sophisticated weaponry whatsoever used in South Vietnam. There was, I don't know if you ever heard of the MiG-29 or MiG-19, I think, that came down out of the north into South Vietnam and shot down a helicopter that was refueling off of a C-130.
No.
Yeah, it was right up near the border. Pretty hush-hush, but actually they got tape recordings of it from Crown 6. The C-130s flew around and refueled the King aircraft, which was the Air Force air rescue helicopter. It was always in the air. And there was 2 of them that had come up to refuel off a C-130. And while one of them was sitting there refueling, there was one off of each wing. They had the refueling probes come down, helicopters come up and refuel off of them. And when you listen to the tape, it was pretty cool. They talked about this bandits at 12 o'clock, 40 miles out. Mm-hmm. And you heard it all the time, when you're listening to the emergency frequencies. And you never thought about MiGs coming down out of the north into South Vietnam. It just never happened. Mm-hmm. And pretty soon it was bandits, 12 o'clock, 20 miles out. They just ignored them, basically, okay, yeah, it's, somebody that's not reported in or squawking on emergency frequency. And all of a sudden, everybody goes bananas, and they said, MiGs, and they fired a rocket and shot one of the, I'm sure he was aiming at the 130, down all 3 of them, but he actually hit the Jolly Green. And of course, blew him up right out of the sky. Jesus. He just came down, fired the rocket, and then took off right away and went back to North Vietnam. But that happened in '68, sometime or other. You Google that, there's the story of it on there. It was pretty classified at the time, and then when it was determined it was in fact a MiG and that he'd come out of the north, they'd traced back to it. Everybody was, anybody said bandits, you got your attention from that point on, because it was just never done. So, nuclear weapons, I don't think were ever considered. Not that I ever was aware of. Mm-hmm. I mean, I think if they'd have gone after that war to win it, that's the first thing I'd have done, Shoot.
Yeah, from the outright.
Screw around with me, just drop one on Hanoi here and be done with this.
Not even an A-bomb. Get one of those big old hydrogen bombs.
Yeah, it was a big worry. I'm sure the Soviets would have got into it. The Chinese would have got into it. Everything. But the Soviets were there as advisors already anyway, and the Chinese were there as advisors already anyway.
Yeah. Do you think the MiG coming down and shooting that rocket and turning right around?
I don't know what's this.
Excuse me? I think we have a little bit of delay.
What was the question again?
Do you think the MiG streaking down over the border, shooting that rocket, and then turning around and going right back out, you think that was the equivalent of like a pot shot? Just kind of...
Oh, I think so, yeah. He just... And he probably was operating by himself, alone.
Yeah.
And it could be he didn't even know he was inside of stuff yet.
Yeah, maybe.
But I know if I'm a young kid up there in a MiG and I see this target down there, what are you going to do?
Yeah.
Let's go.
Yeah. Especially if you're a Vietnamese pilot, a MiG is a spaceship to you. Yeah. You're gonna put that throttle all the way forward. Go get some heads. Go get some scalps.
Go get one. So, and whether that happened or whether it was intentional, I don't know, but it never did happen again. I mean, I think they set up anti-aircraft along the border, and they, of course, they'd have let the horse out of the barn. Then they would have been more aware of any MiGs even coming close to the border. Then they'd had aircraft up after them, but it didn't happen.
Yeah.
All the bases were further up. There wasn't too many bases down near the border, so they're a little demilitarized zone, So.
Do you think... I was going to say, it almost seems like it could have some psychological impacts, right? Because you said up until then, no one ever... You heard bandit, and it was just whatever.
Yeah, because where we flew, we had air traffic controllers that would call out bandits all the time. And it was always just unidentified aircraft. You looked up, and of course, it's just their job to call off any unidentified aircraft as a bandit. Until you knew what they were a bandit. So, but from that point on, every time you heard the word bandit, it definitely got your attention. You were looking around in the sky all the time after that.
Well, that's what I mean. That's what I mean, right? That's an effective force amplification for the North Vietnamese, right? Because now you just got to say, hey, go screech across the border for 10 seconds. You're going to get every helicopter in the sky to stand down. And then you only got to, it's like the boy who cried wolf. You only got to actually shoot someone down, I don't know, maybe once a year. But make them think it's always coming. Yeah, it's effective. Yeah. How would you, as a helicopter pilot, how would you even fight against? So, in all my knowledge of helicopter pilots, because I play video games, right? It's right, because it's basically the same. I know you served a couple tours in Vietnam, but I've played a lot of video games, so I'd say we're on an even keel.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, right.
I'll send you a DFC.
Yeah, just send me my wings, and but it's...
Give you a couple of bells, you can wear them on there.
And if people ask, I'll just lie, right? It's, but what
like we do.
Yeah. But, like, in video games, right? It's always, you go up against another helicopter. It's always who's the better pilot, right? Because it's tit for tat. You're in the same fixed rotor wing. But always in a video game, if a fighter jet comes after you, there's nothing to do but just bail. Or you go and try to hide behind a mountain ledge, right? Because you know that they can't. So you try to just hop over a ridge back and forth so they can't get you. In real life, because you were actually there, was there ever any training, or was it just kind of you hope it doesn't happen?
Oh, that was never for taking on an aircraft.
Not even taking on, evading.
Yeah, evading. No, I never had 1 hour or a single minute of training on how to avoid a jet aircraft. I don't think I even thought about it.
Mm-hmm.
It was never an issue.
Really?
Yeah. Yeah, I said the MiGs just did not come into South Vietnam.
Yeah.
So.
What's the most?
And I was probably 800 miles south of the DMZ anyway. Okay. So somebody would have intercepted a MiG before I got there, unless he came down through Cambodia and came in that way. That was the only way he'd have got toward us. But I said it was never an issue. I never thought about it. I don't think we ever gave it a moment's thought that we'd get shot down by a MiG.
I was watching an interview last night with a former Ranger sniper, and he was talking about when he first went over to Iraq or Afghanistan in like 2008, and he was there for 2 years. He said it's a lot of times you can get beginner's luck. And he goes, which is dangerous because you start to get really cocky. You're an 18-year-old over there, right? You're a Ranger. You're the baddest of the bad. You're below Delta. But I mean, like, in his words, he's like, we pretend we're the baddest of the bad. But he talked about when he was first there, he was like, you can start to get a little cocky. He was like, I was getting like 5 guys a night on these missions when we'd go out, right? Granted, when they would go out, so maybe it's only every other week. But he's like, you get 5 guys, and he's like, you're feeling pretty good. And he's like, and then I remember we were pinned down by a Chechen sniper, and this guy was clearly better than me. And he was like, it was humbling because I realized he's like, we're doing volleyball with with snipers, and he's like, they come back. We were surrounded. It was like me and 3 other Rangers in this foxhole they had dug. And he's like, and we were actually kind of openly debating, do we just pull a grenade and kill ourselves because we're surrounded, and these people, I mean, this is ISIS, this is Taliban, they're going to boil you alive. And, luckily they got out. But he goes, that was very humbling, and it turned me into a much better, effective operator because I kind of had, I was cut down to size. When you were over there, start to get a little cocky, you're going in, you're doing some airdrops, you're maybe hitting some people, you're like, I'm Jon Beckenhauer, I'm as good as they get. And then do you have a day where, like the sniper goes, I remember I went back that night and I cried myself to sleep because I realized I almost died. Is there anything like that happened to you?
Oh, certainly. Yeah. I think, number one, you come out of flight school, you're pretty dang cocky. There's nothing that the instructors couldn't throw at you at the end that you couldn't handle.
But that's also by design, right?
Emergency procedures. I mean, you'd be flying along, and an instructor's job is, of course, to throw stuff at you to test you. But the idea was to give you the confidence that you could handle anything that they threw at you to start with. Emergency procedures was always the big thing. He'd sit there and you'd be rolling along, and you're looking down. You're supposed to be protecting some gunships down there on a LZ or something. You just reach over and turn your throttle off. Engine out.
Now what?
And you've got just seconds to react to that. I mean, if you're under 500 feet, you're less than 8 seconds. You're going to be on the ground. You rolled up in a little ball, or if you do it right, you're going to put it into hopefully a big enough spot where you don't roll it into a ball, but it's going to be a situation where at least you're going to walk away from it. I mean, you might have to crash into trees or whatever, but you knew how to crash into trees if you had to. You knew how to land on a side of a hill if you had to. You knew how to land in a small spot as long as you needed. If you could get your helicopter into a hole in the trees that's big enough that your rotor blades aren't going to hit it, and put it on the ground and not crash, you're pretty good.
Can you go? I'm making a note of that. Can you go into that really quickly? Hold on, let me.
Okay, if your helicopter engine quits, I mean, a big myth is that you just fall like a rock and you're going to die. That's not really what happens. If you do it right, if the engine quits, well, hopefully you got a little warning. Usually you'll see your oil pressure start to drop, or your engine temperature starts to go up, and you got a little warning. So you're already looking for a place to put it on the ground. A helicopter, when the engine quits, of course, the power goes out of the rotor system. So to keep that power in there, you have to bottom your collective, which, well, best to describe it as it's like a fan effect. Your helicopter goes into a 60 degree to a 90, 80, 60, 80 degree descent. I mean, you're coming almost straight down. And the wind is coming up through your rotor, which keeps it turning.
Okay.
And that's the whole magic. You got to keep that rotor turning, because if the rotor quits, rotors just fold up and you go into the ground as a rock.
Really? They just like an umbrella?
So you don't want to do that. You want to keep it going. And so as you're coming down, you're looking for a place to put it on the ground. And basically, you're going to get what's in front of you. Unless you turn into a wind, you might be able to get a little more distance out of it.
Yeah.
But the higher you are, of course, the more altitude you have, the more of a circle that you've got to land. So say there's a football field down there, and you're flying over a city and there's a football field, that's what you're going to go to. Big flat field, big enough to fit your aircraft into, and you just glide your helicopter over there. When you get just above the ground, which usually about 100 feet, you flare your aircraft, which pushes more air into the rock. You get the rotor going as fast as you can, because the more power you got into that rotor, the more power you have at the bottom of it to take out the velocity of the aircraft coming down. As you get 100 feet, you start to flare, you get the water or the air going into it. You get to 15, 20 feet, you start to pull in your power, just like you're going to take off. So it just slows the helicopter down, and you get it right above the ground. You'll level the aircraft off, and hopefully you set down to the ground with very little descent speed. You coming in. And if you do it right, I mean, you just put the helicopter down like any other normal landing, only your rotor slows down real fast. And you open the door and you walk away from it, If you don't, and that's the ideal thing, is to have a big football flat field. Might be the side of a mountain, however. So you got to learn how am I going to crash into a mountain? What you do is you get your nose uphill, up the mountain. You crash and your aircraft hits down, you're going to roll backwards maybe, or you'll roll it to the side, and you're going to walk away. The idea is to get the aircraft slowed down to almost zero ground speed. And
then plop.
And then if you're over water, you roll it to the right, so the rotor hits the water first and not the aircraft.
Why is that?
If you're on as your rotor is turning clockwise or counterclockwise on a Huey, as well as the forward rotor of a Chinook. So if you roll it to the right, that blade's going to hit if it's a tree, if it's the ground or water landings, when you definitely want to roll it to the right. When you roll it to the right, it absorbs all the rotor blades coming around and around.
Oh, okay.
And if your rotor blade hits something and doesn't, it comes through the cockpit. And it can kill the pilot on the right pretty easy.
Oh, geez.
If it hits at full speed, it's going to take that out. So like I said, sometimes you don't have any choice. You land into a jungle tree. Just before you hit the trees, you want to roll it over on the right side, so it takes that all out. If it's 2 or 3 trees, you want to hit in the middle of those trees so that
kind of shear it.
Trees take all the absorbent, and hopefully most people walk away from a tree landing. You might have to crawl down out of the tree to get out of the tree to the ground, but you usually walk away from it unless it's a fluke and a branch or something comes through and sticks you in the gut or whatever. You can walk away. Water landings are pretty, if you can get out of the aircraft, and you practice that. In flight school, you had simulators, you sat in a cockpit basically, and they released this thing over a swimming pool. You'd crash into the swimming pool, and then you had to, follow the bubbles. You had to wait till everything stopped, open the door, and then you swim to the top. And if it's dark and they turn the lights out, you look at your bubbles and see which way the bubbles go, and you follow the bubbles up. So you practice that a lot. So I guess go back to the beginning, or you're pretty darn cocky. That's one of the things you learn real quick is if you screw up on a rotation, that's what it's called. If your engine quits, you go to the ground, it's called an auto rotation. That's what the maneuver is called. that can be pretty humbling. You screw that up. You also got an instructor sitting over there who's got 10 times the experience you got. You do something pretty cocky and you think, you do an engine out and you land into the wind and you put it on the ground and you just, wow, that's pretty cool. And he said, well, did you turn your fuel valve off before you landed?
Yeah.
I forgot that one little thing. You know?
Now, did you have what's the protocol for you land in the middle of, you manage to not roll over into a ball of fire and metal and you walk away. Do you have MREs, like a pistol, a map? Like, what's the fail-safe? Or not fail-safe, what's the preparation?
Yeah, good question. If when you get on board the aircraft, one of the things you check, you have an emergency kit. Okay. And that's the size of a 2 or 3 typewriter boxes that fit in this thing. It had survival gear in it. Had a radio in it, had flares in it, had a weapon in it, a flare gun. You might have MREs in it, sea rations and hard. You had a net, stuff like that. It was there, and it was strapped to the side of the aircraft. And you just checked to make sure it was there. You knew what was in it if you ever had to use it. You had a survival vest that everybody wore. On your survival vest, you had a radio. You had flares. You had a morphine shot there if you're in pain. You had fishing nets. You had what else would you have? Fish line.
Did you wear that? Sorry to interrupt. Did you wear that in addition to the, so in case everything goes to shit, you just have that already on you, so you wake up and you already have it, as opposed to let's go get this several typewriter box. Yeah.
Usually, if you had an emergency, you get shot down or whatever, it happens so fast, and you're so excited. If you don't have it on you, you're not going to have it.
Yeah, I'm making a note of that right now.
Correct. Get out. You want to get out of the aircraft. You're trained to get out of the aircraft as soon as the rotor stops. As soon as there's motion, stop. You get out.
Run. Yeah.
Because you don't know if you're going to fire. You don't know if you're going to be taking fire. From, if you're in the enemy territory, you might start taking fire right away. But that's the protocol. You get out of the aircraft, and then if you're in enemy territory, you grab your M60 machine guns, all the ammo you can carry, and you set up a defensive perimeter right away. And hopefully you got off a radio call. Now, as helicopters, you very seldom did you ever fly alone over there. There was always other helicopters around somewhere. And if you got off a Mayday call, you weren't going to be on the ground 10, 15 minutes. Somebody's going to pick you up and get you out of there. So you got out of the aircraft, you set up a defensive perimeter with the weapons you had, and hopefully you didn't get captured. Somebody came in and got you out of there. But everybody had a radio in your survival gear. You had flares, so if your radio didn't work or you got damaged or whatever, you could shoot a flare up. If you're in the jungle, you could see where you were at, where the pilots were at, if you were the one doing the rescuing, and you get in there. But of course, the whole trick is how much time do you have, and is the aircraft on fire, and 3 are you in enemy territory? All dictates what procedure protocol you go through. First thing you do, anything happens, you try to fly the aircraft out of the area.
Yeah, try to get us. Yeah.
If the aircraft's not safe to fly, you don't know if something's going to explode on it. You don't know if your hydraulics are going out. If your engine's on fire, any of those things, you got to get it on the ground right away. You don't really have a choice. You can't fly the aircraft out. But you always
ticking time bomb.
You always maintain control of the aircraft as long as you can. If you lose control of the aircraft, you're going to die anyway, more than likely, unless you're on already. So you always maintain control of the aircraft, no matter what the emergency is. Number one, you always maintain control of the aircraft. The co-pilot hopefully will get the radio call off. He gets the Mayday out. He starts to coordinate whatever rescue efforts you're going to take if you're on there. If you get to the ground safely, then of course everything changes. You go into survival mode after that. But I don't know how many times I was in an emergency of some sort. Everything from engine fire to getting shot up to your crew was wounded or whatever. The excitement level goes way up, and you got to learn to just calm yourself. Fly the airplane. You put that in your head. Control the aircraft. And so once you got the aircraft in control, you got the emergency procedure taken care of. Next thing is to get to a safe place and get on the ground if the aircraft's not going to fly very much longer.
Now, how do you excitement level? So like instant anxiety attack. So do you just
hopefully you train for that. Like I said, the whole thing is anytime you have a thing like that, you train yourself to stay calm. You've got to think through it. It's the only thing in many cases where it's going to survive that. Now, it doesn't necessarily always work. And there were several times. I can think of one time especially. We were flying all day. We're, pretty relaxed. We're, nothing's happening, and basically we're just resupplying this LZ, and we'd been into it probably 20 times already, resupplying ammo and water and everything. And it was at the top of a mountain. It's down by Fanring, and the mountain had this little fire base on it. It had like 4 or 5 tubes up there, and it'd come in and it'd shoot up. And when you've got a mountain that's like that, when you land at the top of it, it's called a pinnacle approach. I mean, you set up pretty high and you come down pretty steep as you're coming down to it. So when the load gets to the top, you pull in your power, you come to a hover right at the spot where you want to drop the load to. Well, we were coming in, and I had my co-pilot do one sortie and I'd do the next sortie, and we're switching back and forth. And I can't remember at the time I know who he was, but I can't remember if he was just a new guy or whether he was experienced too. But he had done the sortie before, and the guy on the ground had said, "Well, I think might have some enemy action around here." Some guy said he thought he'd spotted somebody down the hill. So we come around and said, I thought, I'll take the next one. And we come in and nothing's happening. So, I just came down, and we're about coming through 200 feet or so. And all of a sudden, this guy, a sniper opened up on us and just, all the aircraft just started taking hits. I mean, you can hear them. It's like somebody hitting the side of the aircraft with a hammer. Mm-hmm. And I just I went into panic mode like that. And I basically froze on the controls, like, geez, I don't know what to do here. And I'd never had that before. I mean, the co-pilot said, I got it. And he took over the controls of it. And he, of course, banked off to the side, and we went on our merry way. But, I mean, it was the only time I ever had that happen to me. Yeah. If I'd have been solo, I'd have crashed right inside I'm sure, because I would have had no idea what the heck I was doing. Because it lasted 3 to 4 or 5 seconds probably, that I just had I just basically froze on the control.
Yeah,
and it happened. I mean, I had co-pilots. Usually the new guys is where that happens to. Once you're there for a while, you're in the mode, and you been through enough situations where when it's coming. You get yourself into a relaxed mode. Mm-hmm. And a lot of times it happens so fast you don't have time to think about it. You just go into what your training tells you. And then all through school, they all the time, instructor pilots are throwing stuff at you that they want you to panic, because they want you to know what that feels like and how to control it and to stay in the right mode. So I think that the training kicks in. Whatever happens, if it's bad, whatever happens that you've been trained for is what you're going to do. Mm-hmm. And if it happens and you panic, it's not something that you're very proud of afterwards. You just I ain't got the right stuff for this crap, and you lose your confidence is what happens.
Do you think that maybe going through that is necessary though? Like, how can you even know whether or not you have the right stuff until it happens? I've had on a Delta Force guy a ton of times, Dale Comstock. He was on here yesterday. He's a hoot. But he talks about when they would be working with the Indige, the Afghanis, because he would do a lot of covert things where their force amplification was using the indigenous peoples. And he's like, you'd be looking at these guys, and they'd They didn't speak a lick of English. They couldn't read or write. They had sandals. They just, they didn't use toilet paper. They're like just the most primitive. And you're like, what are these goofballs doing? He's like, and then like the bullets would start flying. And every once in a while, one of them, he was like, you would just see them. They would just turn into the most cool-headed Rambo. They just took orders and they just attacked the target. And he's like, I saw some Indige who didn't even have matching sandals, like out courage some Navy SEALs. And he's like, sometimes you just don't know until the shit hits the fan. Do you think that's necessary? What happened to you? Because like who can say, I'll keep my cool when a sniper starts shooting at me? No, it has to be when you least expect it.
Well, it's definitely once it happens to you, that cockiness you had before, you don't have that anymore.
Stand up a little more straight.
About the time anybody gets cocky like that, if you don't have a good instructor knocking it out of you, mm-hmm. or something happens and knock it out of there on your own,
probably kill you.
You know what an FNG is, right? That's basically the content. Yeah, they don't have that confidence level in them yet.
Yeah.
And as an instructor, I was always putting them in situations where they make their jaws tight. But
yeah.
If once you got past the cockiness, got a couple of situations where you knew you were going to do the right thing, you didn't worry about it. It was a lot more. I don't know what's the right word. The confidence level was up, but I don't care how confident you were. Sometimes you get stuff thrown at you. You had no idea mm-hmm. what to do, and you just relied on training and luck mm-hmm. to get you.
Because if you don't have that cockiness knocked out of you, it's probably going to be the death of you, right? I mean. It's going to be that's going to be the Darwinian law is going to come in.
You're going to do something really stupid, and
you're going to put your head over the parapet, and you're going to get shot in the face.
And they didn't come home.
Yeah, yeah. That's an odd evolutionary selection phenomena. Now that I think about it, right? Because to be cocky, you first, unless you're just a jackass, but normally you have to have some. It's based on something, right? You've won a couple, right? You've won a couple things. You've got a couple good, whatever, dropping off or, air brake, and you've done a couple cool things, which then would lead the mind to think that the cockiest, even though cockiness isn't good, only the good get cocky. But then once you get cocky, you stop taking precautions, and then you get your head chopped off, metaphorically or literally. So it's a weird. Do the shitty pilots end up surviving longer because they don't get that? I don't know what I'm talking about. Clearly, I play video games, and you are actually a pilot. But
it's a confidence thing. The cockiness comes from confidence, of course, like you said. But there's a level where that no matter how good you are, somebody's going to be better. But all it takes is some sniper sitting down there that gets a lucky shot. Mm-hmm. Yeah, might be the first bullet he ever fired, mm-hmm. and so it's a divine intervention. Yeah, it gets out of a lot of times.
Yeah, there was I remember in genetics in college we learned about they have all these like names for different like forms of evolution, different like phenomena and stuff. And it's like it's not always the most fit, and fit is like a genetic term, capital FIT, and it's like the most it's the most children that you bring to reproductive age or something. That's the definition, period. Not who's the tallest, who's the strongest. It's who brings the most children to reproductive age to where they can fend for themselves. And now it's politically incorrect, but I remember my professor, he would always tell us like the tale of like the gay fish. And he was like, there's this one fish that had all these scales that were brightly colored and stuff. And they kind of, they were like gay fish. And what they would do is they hung out with all the women fish. But they would very sneakily reproduce with them. They kind of, they'd have the most kids. And it's like that, you don't expect that. You'd expect the strong fish. And then another phenomena was the kerosene drinkers. There are these guys somewhere in South America where they would take shots of kerosene and it would kill kerosene fuel. And, you only need a couple shots before it kills you. However, when these guys would do it, the guys that did the kerosene drinking, that was a sign of strength. That was a sign of like fertility. Well, the night, as they were like winning the competition, all the women in this tribe would sleep with them. And so they would lay their seed. They would have sexual intercourse several times that night, and they would have a lot of kids. A lot of times these guys died the next morning because, the kerosene. However, they ejaculated into the most number of women unless they had kids. And the kids would grow up and they'd have the same sort of cockiness, the same attitude, and they would turn into very good kerosene drinkers. They would all fuck, and they'd have a lot of kids. So it was this weird counterintuitive thing where the guys that were drinking diesel fuel were actually having the most kids. And so this weird natural selection happened to where these guys, after several generations, could just drink diesel fuel. I don't know where the hell I'm going with this, but it's something to do with...
How did we get from it?
I don't know. We got from caisson to kerosene, but... Caisson to kerosene, but you know what? Something about where it's... I don't know. Maybe it does pass along. You become the best. I don't know where the hell I was going with that. But, so, I guess we'll just go back to a point we were talking about. I don't know how the fuck we got there. You're probably looking at me going, who the hell is this kid? Why am
who's listening to this and wants to stay with you?
I guarantee you more people are staying with this, though, right? You got to throw them a curveball, right? You got to bring up kerosene and gay fish.
That's what I'm going to say next.
Hey, right? man, Vietnam, kerosene, gay fish. It's a golden corral. It's a buffet. No one knows what they're going to get. Yeah. But let's just go back to a point we were talking about, though. Is you get the cockiness knocked out of you.
Yeah. Well, you've probably heard it. There's old pilots and there's bold pilots, but there's no bold pilots.
Yeah. Yeah.
You'll learn that before you get out of flight school, but then you don't believe it. Mm-hmm. But after you've had a few encounters, then you think, yeah, there's something to that,
Yeah.
We had one of I guess the best things that I got out of my tours in Vietnam was that when I first went over there, I told you I got Chinooks, and so when I got to Vietnam, I flew gunships for a while. But then when I got into the Chinook unit, when I was flying in the 335th. The Huey unit, all young pilots. There was no second tour pilots. Everybody there, and some of them had been there for a year, but they hadn't, and that were very experienced pilots, but they weren't second tour pilots. But when I went over to the Chinook unit, there was a lot of, probably a fourth of the pilots were W3s and W4, chief warrant officers, and second tour, third tour pilots. We had one guy, he was a World War II pilot, bomber pilot. Then he flew jets in Korea, and then he decided he'd switch over to the Army and fly helicopters. So this guy was 54 years old, and we called him Pappy, but he was
Pappy,
the most experienced pilot we had in the unit. Then we had a couple W3s. They were very experienced pilots too, and those were the guys you flew with for the first 25 to 50 hours when you got in country. They took anything out of cockiness out of you. Those guys, as we used to say, we'd walk out to the flight line in the morning with a W4. He'd whistle, and the aircraft would come over and strap itself onto his butt, and we'd take off.
Oh Jesus! Okay, so all right, someone like that.
They were so experienced, that the aircraft respected them instead of him respecting the aircraft. But anyway, they were your instructors, and so the pilots that flew in the Huey units didn't have that experience level teaching them. And so the Chinook guys, I think, in 68, 69 anyway, by the time 70 came around, they were like me. They were teaching all of the top guns in the classes straight into Chinooks, straight over to Vietnam. And so by the time I came home, I was 21 years old and the most experienced and oldest pilot in the unit. Mm-hmm. There wasn't any W4s around anymore to teach them. So by experience level, I probably had as much experience, and the other IPs in the unit had just as much experience as the W4s did. So, it was an experience level and a maturity level that we had versus some of the younger ones that didn't have the opportunity to learn from that kind of pilot level. That a lot of them killed themselves because of the stupidity things they were doing.
Mm-hmm. Have you?
I mean, when you take an aircraft, I saw this happen. A Huey pilot showing off. Probably two 19-year-old pilots. I don't know the names of them. They thought they would fly underneath the bridge, showing off to the guys down on the ground. So they flew underneath the bridge where there wasn't enough clearance. Underneath the bridge, the rotors hit the rotor blades, and of course they went into a ball of flame and killed themselves. But Jeez. Why would you do that? That was just stupid. But it was inexperience. You would an old bold pilot would never do that.
The kerosene drinkers.
Yeah, exactly. The same parallel. There you go. You can use it now.
There we go. It's. I was gonna say on a quick side note. I don't know if you've ever heard. There's an anecdote of Curtis LeMay walking up and down the flight line of some B-52s, and they're fueling them, and they're dripping, and there's fuel everywhere on the ground. And he's walking around chomping on a cigar, and someone says, it's Curtis LeMay. No one wants to tell him anything, right? I mean, this guy led the bomber formations over Japan, Strategic Air Command. He's the guy that would say, with a little more luck, the Cuban Missile Crisis could have been World War III. It's that guy. He was apparently chopping a cigar, and he was walking on the flight line. It might have been Vietnam, but what you said about like the W4 whistling, someone goes up to him and says, like, General, like you can't be smoking, like one ember, and this whole flight line is going to go up. And apparently he stopped, looked at the planes, and said they wouldn't dare.
Yeah,
they wouldn't dare catch fire. Cool. Yeah, that was kind of, they wouldn't dare, and it's the planes respected him. But so you sort of knock the cockiness out of them. Now, is there? I would imagine there's got to be a balance, though, right? There's bold pilots, old pilots, no old bold pilots, or beware of old men in a profession where men die young. Is there a counter between being too cautious? Like someone just, I'm not going to do that, or I'm not going to go fly that. And it's like, no, that's your job. You have to go do that.
Exactly. Oh, yeah. That was a good question, because there was, I guess to give an example, I was called magnet ass because we had pilots that would fly into anything, and they would put caution aside because the guy on the ground needed help. Okay. And we had other pilots that went home that had never taken a bullet through an aircraft the whole time they were there. Now, either that's luck, or they don't have enough balls to fly into an LZ that they could possibly nut up at.
Is it cowardice?
Yeah. See, the idea was that the guy on the ground was the king. He needed help. You helped him. That's what you're there for.
Yeah, he's fucked.
But you had to use a certain amount of caution. I mean, I probably stepped over that line when I went in to Bill with the load with 4 gunships covering me. I probably shouldn't have done that. And I look back now, a smart thing would to not done that, because there's no way that you're more likely. I mean, your chances of getting in and out of there and being successful with the mission are pretty slim, But there was a lot of times where you'd start into an LZ, the guy on the ground would say the LZ's hot. So you say, well, what's hot? Are you taking mortars? Are you just taking sniper fire? Is there one guy down there shooting at you? Or you got a whole company surrounded? Or are you taking mortars or rockets, or what's the deal? And what are your chances? I mean, did the last helicopter get in and out all right? And what did he do? So you minimize the risk that you would do, and then you'd had to make a judgment call. Well, do I have a chance of getting in there and getting the load in or not? The medevac pilots were the ones that had to make that call more than anybody else. If somebody was wounded on the ground and you got called in, medevac pilot's going in regardless. He doesn't have much choice. If you got a wounded guy on the ground and he's going to die if you don't get there, the sense of urgency, I guess, was much greater than if I've got a load of ammunition and they've still got 5,000 pounds left. Do I really need to get in there right now or not? So I guess it's the circumstances that dictated. There was a lot of pilots, though, that could not conquer fear. They were just scared to death. Now, they could handle the aircraft all right, but if it came to enemy action and it came to being safe or completing the mission, they'd take safe over completing the mission any day. And not a lot of them were that way. I mean, under the circumstances, most of us got filtered out before they got out of flight school. They never got the wings. They knew that they didn't have the right stuff. They quit, or one of the instructors saw they didn't have the right stuff, and you dropped them. Mm-hmm. By the time you got to Vietnam, there wasn't a lot of pilots, though, that lost it. I'd say in our unit, I can name you two of them right away. I won't say the names, but there's no way that they would have ever flown into any hot LZ. They would just, they didn't have the balls to do it. One of them, we put in the maintenance officer, and he flew aircraft around the traffic pattern, which was a pretty safe job for the most part, but he was a good maintenance officer, so don't put him out on the line. If you don't have the right stuff, don't put him in circumstances where they're going to kill somebody else and kill themselves and put the crew at risk because they don't do the right thing and they're not going to do the right thing. The worst thing that could happen is if the guy on the ground needed EMO or whatever, and the pilot had the tool, the aircraft to do the job, and he didn't do it. He failed to do the job. That's what you call a coward, and you don't want that in the cockpit. Answer your question?
Yeah.
The circumstances dictate what you do, but also if you don't have the balls to do what you're supposed to do, you can't do the job either. So I mean, either way, it's bad.
Yeah. Now, is there any is there like a cold, a sort of cold calculus where you have a pilot that is willing to go in? They're not cocky. They're just they're a talented pilot. They're not a coward. It's a medevac. But what if this is your only medevac pilot and it's for a soldier that's on death's door, and it's one soldier, and if this pilot gets shot down, you're going to have to send in... Is there any times where someone higher up goes, don't do it? It's because, I mean, you can't let... It's like why they didn't send in more Black Hawks in Mogadishu, in Somalia, because it wasn't a cowardice thing. It was just hey, if we lose another one, we're going to have to send in another rescue team, another SEAL team to go put thermite in the avionics, which are classified. We're going to lose more pilots. Sometimes there is a calculus that you kind of have to be the detached, cold general to, make that call, right? It's like, Eisenhower knew what D-Day was going to cost.
50 people killed to rescue one person.
That's what I mean. Who makes that call? Because it's very... it's very easy to, because you obviously can't say that, because everyone needs to believe that they're not going to be left behind, right? I'm not going to go join them. Granted, there's a draft, it's different, but I'm going to be less, me, the 30-year-old, hot-headed guy. If you're telling me, yeah, we don't always go get everyone, well, now I'm going to start having some doubts. Like, is there a balance between that? I mean, it's an incredibly difficult thing to call, but... we see it right now with COVID and ventilators, right? In Italy. Who gets to live? 95 with a pre-existing condition, 25 healthy as a horse. Who makes the call?
Somebody's got to make that call. Yeah, almost in most circumstances in Vietnam, anyway, you had what's called a Charlie Bird, a command and control, and all, especially combat assaults, where the chances of getting shot at and people getting killed are much higher than just normal day-to-day ash and trash. You had a bird out there that had usually an 06 or an 05 colonel or a lieutenant colonel that was in charge of making those decisions. The little old W-1 down there in the helicopter, however, is the aircraft commander. His job is to follow orders, but he's responsible for that airplane and that crew and the job that they're supposed to do. I don't think there's that there's too many W-1s or younger lieutenants or even captains had to make that kind of level decision. The medevac pilots, yes. Medevac pilots, like I said, to me, had most respect of anybody in Vietnam because they had to make the call whether they could get in and risk 4 people in their aircraft to rescue somebody and get 10 more people killed in the process. Mm-hmm. That didn't make any sense. You got missions where that happened, but usually it was a judgment call, and it was something happened that wasn't supposed to happen, and they didn't have all the information to go in and do it. I don't think there was too many times where an aircraft went in where they knew they were going to get killed and went anyway. If there was a chance where you had a slim chance of getting somebody out, they would take it and do it. But there was always a boundary where if you got to a certain point, you either pulled off, or the guy on the ground would tell you to get out, don't come in, or the guy in the air, who usually 90% of the time would say, no, you're not authorized to make that rescue yet. So you'd come back out in orbit and wait till the ground fire had ceased, or they got the enemy situation better under control, or they carried him out to a different location where it didn't do it. If the guy was lying there dying, the ground guy would have to make that decision whether he was rescuable. Is that a word? Mm-hmm. Well, he could be rescued, mm-hmm. Or not. And I said every effort was made to save lives if it's possible, but there was times when I guess you just have to make that bad call that somebody's going to have to die.
Do you think that is there any phenomenon where it's I'm thinking of had on here episode 95 Mike Durant, who's obviously the pilot shot down in Mogadishu. And as everyone knows from the movie, or from his book, 2 Delta Force snipers were inserted. They were told they did not have to go, and at first they were told they weren't authorized, but finally they said, we're very aware of what's going on. We're very clear that no one's coming to get us. But it was Gary Gordon and Randy Shukart, the 2 Delta Force snipers that went in, and I think those 2 went in, and I think they killed something like 25 Somalis, which actually did save Mike Durant's life, because a lot of people think, well, the mob went to get him. Actually, from his story in The Company of Heroes, he talks about the time they bought him, it wasn't in vain, because the mob was about to kill him, but someone came there who was one of the militia leaders, saw him and knew he was a bargaining chip, and they went and picked him up. And then that militia that took him was then strong-armed by the ID'd militia, ID'd was the guy we were going to get. They found out that this sort of lesser gang had Durant, and they just showed up and said, give him to us or we're going to kill you. The point is, though, is they were getting ready to kill him. In the movie Black Hawk Down, they take the butt of a rifle and they hit him. Mr. Durant talks about in his book, In the Company of Heroes, what it actually was the severed arm of one of the snipers, and he kept that to himself for about a decade. But they beat him with that. but that time that they bought him was enough time that just through sheer odds or luck, one of the people in the crowd wasn't just this crazy, they were chewing KHAT and amphetamine, these crazy cat high Somalis, but rather it was someone from a militia that was like, ooh, that guy's valuable, don't kill him. So there was an actual, these guys didn't die in vain, Mr. Durant. Yeah. Yeah, and then and he also went on to help teach tons of courses up for being a downed pilot and how to survive 13 days. So there actually was this massive benefit from Randy Shugart and Gary Gordon, who both received the Medal of Honor posthumously for doing that. But back to the original thing, is these were guys that they knew that it was a death sentence, but they were also, as Mr. Durant says, they could shoot a raccoon on a roller coaster. Like, that's how good they were. So there's also this level of maybe not cockiness, but also like, I mean, we're going to take a couple guys down with us, right?
We could, yeah.
Yeah. So something like that, though, where it's almost a voluntary, like you don't have to go in there, but they chose to anyway. What is that? Is that guys that have a death wish? Is it guys that are just either we're going to die or he's going to die, and it's one or the other, so let's just, I don't know. Is there something like that?
Well, I can give you a reference to one. We called him Combat Ernie. Combat Ernie would, he was a young pilot, and he's one of these guys that, he was out for glory, you know. He would, if we get mortared at night, he'd strap on all his combat gear and run down to the perimeter with his M16 and try to find somebody to shoot, you know. The rest of us are all hiding in the bunker. Yeah. Like the infantry do that. That's their job, not their combat. Hey, and Ernie go out there and do that stuff. Ernie, so he had a judgment. He didn't have very good judgment
Do you think he did? Do you think maybe it was?
He did die. He did said he survived Vietnam, but he came home and was killed in a motorcycle wreck, which my guess, I don't know what the circumstances were, sure, whether it was his fault or something else, but knowing Combat Ernie, he was probably challenging the limits and exceeded them, you know, but who knows?
Well, that's what I mean, is it almost seems...
You got people that had, you know, it is a judgment call. It's a lot more than confidence. It's a lot more than having the right stuff. It's knowing when to have the right stuff, you know, and having a good sense of balance between confidence and judgment, you know. Well, what is the right thing, and then doing the right thing.
Are there? Do you think someone like Combat Ernie is? Do you think that they were just more willing? You're more willing to die? You know, it's almost like Lieutenant Dan from Forrest Gump. Like, damn it, Gump, why'd you leave me out here? I was supposed to die. I mean, I'm just looking at it from maybe you're out there, you're defending your brothers in arms, and you're just like, you know what? I'm not going to turn down anything, and if I die, I die. But maybe those are guys that, and I'm speaking out of turn, maybe those are guys that were just, this was their life. You know, when they come back, they're like, I'm going to be pushing the limits anyway. Maybe it's Combat Ernie in a motorcycle, so might as well die on the battlefield. I don't know. I'm a 30-year-old who's never seen combat.
Yeah, the problem with a guy like that, and you put him in a cockpit, with five other crewmen. Okay. He doesn't belong there unless he's got somebody really experienced that's controlling him.
Yeah.
You know, an aircraft commander has got a lot of responsibility, and if he's a Combat Ernie type where just throw caution to the wind and we're just going to do this stuff and it's just stupid, you know, he would the kind that did stupid stuff. And he came up for check rides twice to be aircraft commander, and I threw stuff at him just to make sure he knew how to do it, and then I made sure he couldn't do it. Yeah. I did not want him as an aircraft commander in the unit. And when I went home, one of the other instructors came down from another unit, gave him a check ride and passed him, not knowing his background and that evidently he got to be aircraft commander, and he did it for one mission and did something stupid and got grounded. He never flew the rest of the time he was there. So yeah, that was a bad deal. They said he was. Problem is he should have never gone to flight school. He should have went to an infantry unit and became an infantry officer. He'd have been a great sniper out there by himself, probably doing really something he'd love to do.
Really pushing.
He's in the wrong spot.
Yeah, he would have been a great solo sniper.
A super colorful character.
Mm-hmm.
I write a book about Combat Ernie and stupid things that boy did.
I'd read Combat Ernie by Jon Beckenhauer.
One of the things Combat Ernie did was there was one day he wasn't flying, and I came home, and as I come around the operations tent, and I'm walking past where I'm headed for my room, Combat Ernie's got this board. He'd taken some C5 out of what do you call those things? The landmines, Claymore mine.
Uh-huh.
He'd taken one of them apart and taken the C4 out of it, and wanted to see how explosive it was. So he stuck it on the ground in front of him and had this 8-foot 2x4, and was going to drop it on the C4, see if he could make it explode. I came around there. I took that 2x4 and hit him upside the head with it. If that thing would have exploded, it'd have blown that 2x4 to bits and probably splintered
shrapnel
right through his brain. He had no idea that was a stupid thing to do. He was just testing it out, see if he could get a little firecracker bang off.
Okay, I can see where now it's like, it's detrimental because now you're putting the lives of others at risk.
He could kill himself and everybody else around him, for his stupidity. But that was just one of the things he did. I could go on for, like I said, I could write a book on some of the
fucking
stuff he did.
Fucking Combat Ernie. He would, maybe you'd want him as like a Oval Office security. He's someone that will take a bullet, right? I think you don't want him piloting anything. You don't want him with explosives. You don't want him on anything covert. I think you want Combat Ernie. I think Combat Ernie stands within 3 feet of the president at all times. That's what I think you want. I think you want Combat Ernie. There is a time.
Well, I'm not sure if he was ever a hero, and they never put him in a situation where he'd want to be a hero. But my guess is he probably wouldn't have the balls to jump in front of a bullet anyway.
Maybe that's.
He might. I don't know. He might.
That's. I think you want or.
You see the personality in movies all the time.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of funny because there's that character is in Platoon. Have you ever seen the Platoon?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there's the character. One of those characters in there is Combat Ernie. I said that the stereotype is there, and he'd seen too many movies, I think, and kind of warped his brain on what he was supposed to be like. I don't want to speak too badly of Combat Ernie because his brother might be out there somewhere and be listening to this and say, "Wait a minute, I know who that guy is."
He'll come get you. He'll come get you and me.
Yeah, come after me, for talking badly about it.
I think Combat Ernie would have done well in the CIA in like the 50s and 60s because there's this it's in the book A Legacy of Ashes, which I didn't know until I read this book like 12 years ago. I didn't know until 2 days ago that quote is from Eisenhower. What's the history of the CIA? It's a legacy of ashes. But he said in Legacy of Ashes, the book, it's late 40s with OSS. OSS was disbanded. CIA, 50s and 60s, dropping guys behind the line at the Iron Curtain. They said it was just them. It was like one of the highest mortality rates in like anything because you'd send in 20 paratroopers a day for 30 days and you'd only ever hear from one of them. It was a death wish.
Jeez.
Maybe that's what Combat Ernie was meant for. You go drop Combat Ernie in Siberia, and you say, "Hey, go figure out something."
Yeah.
I don't know, man. Maybe you clone a Combat Ernie. I don't know, right? You know what Combat Ernie would have done? He would have drank kerosene. He would have drank kerosene.
The stereotype character. What was the other? Catch-22, that movie or the book?
Yeah. The pilot.
Major. Major in that. That's Combat Ernie.
I bet Combat Ernie could take a couple shots of kerosene.
Oh yeah, yeah. Oh yeah, he'd be the first one in line.
I bet Combat Ernie is a direct descendant of the Kerosene Drinkers. Somehow ended up in the U.S.
Got all their DNA.
Someone had a child, and that child, I don't know, just somehow ended up in the United States.
Perfect.
That was Combat Ernie.
Yeah.
If you actually have a lot of Combat Ernie stories, we can set up another podcast episode where we just do Combat Ernie stories. I would love that. I'm not kidding. We can schedule it today. We'll figure out a date.
I'd have to do some thinking on that because I'd probably 15, 20 minute segment. I don't have a whole lot of, but I could gather up a bunch of other. The thing I thought when I wrote this book, if I was write a chapter in a book, would be about Combat Ernie and use his character, the stereotype
as an amalgamation.
All the stuff that all of us had done that were stupid, and put Combat Ernie in charge of that.
Well, that's actually what they do with a lot of stories about classified things. Is they make one character that's actually apparently the movie Zero Dark 30. Apparently, the woman is actually she's an amalgamation of like 12 different people, and it's a way to actually hide names and events and stuff. But I mean, if it's a 20-minute segment, is it a handful of stories?
Oh yeah, I mean,
my dumbass
stolen boat story. There's the he stole a boat once.
Don't tell it right now. What I'm saying is you can tell a story.
Put them together, and then we'll have do a segment of it.
Well, that's what I mean. Is because I never stop talking. I never shut up. So you can tell a story, and then I can comment on it. And we can do another. I bet we could stretch that out into a podcast.
Yeah, we might be able to do that. I'll give that some thought.
I'm dead serious. If you need to change his name or something, and you don't want his surviving relatives to know, that's fine. I get it.
Yeah. Well, I won't mention his last name, but
just don't do that. Yeah, don't. The title's just going to be Combat Ernie.
Combat Ernie. Yep.
That's what. I am absolutely excited for that. Combat Ernie. Maybe that will become a series. Well, I'll get on all the military guys. All the military guys I've had on this podcast. Come on and tell a story of someone that did something stupid, or maybe something you did, but you can just call it Combat Ernie.
Just give him a name.
Maybe we'll just do like a 30-part series. I'll get on Delta Force guys, get on the submariner, get on pilots.
Yeah.
Tell your stories, Combat Ernie.
The stolen boat story is one I'd have to tell because that was.
Don't spoil it right now because that's going to be the opening of the Combat Ernie story. Combat Ernie, Jesus Christ. So I don't know. I guess we'll save that. I'm thinking about. No, I think we'll save that. Do you have anything else? I was going to say we can wrap this one up and we can schedule a Combat Ernie episode.
Well, I was going to talk a little bit about some of the missions that we did over there. But
absolutely. No, let's do it. Let me use the restroom real quick.
I said my favorite story I like to tell is I got to fly with John Wayne one time, and it was. Let's. Hey, I'm going to use the bathroom real quick. But let's do it. Yeah. No, I'm down for more stories. Let's do it. Yeah.
It's the best name ever. Combat Ernie. Combat Ernie. It's the best.
Oh, you love him.
That's the best name ever.
He was the shortest pilot in the unit. He was like 5'2".
That's awesome. That's exactly how I imagine Combat Ernie. 5'2". I feel like Ernie. I feel like he carries around like a 500 Smith & Wesson. Maybe he wears a Claymore as a belt buckle.
He had a pearl-handled pistol.
Oh yeah. That's exactly. He's reincarnated George Patton. He's George Patton as a Vietnam pilot.
He'd carry two rifles with him.
Really?
Dash him in the cockpit. Oh yeah.
Save it all. Save it all for the Combat Ernie episode. I love this. But yeah. So you flew with John Wayne.
This John Wayne story. I'll start from the beginning. I was sleeping. It was about 4:00 in the morning, and it was my day off. I wasn't going to be flying that day. The guy comes in, the night guard, and he wakes me up and says, "You got a VIP mission today. Takeoff is in an hour." So, oh crap! VIP missions usually. What that meant was you're going to be flying reporters around, and you take them out and you drop them somewhere and you sit and you wait and you wait and you wait and you put in a long day and you get about 2 or 3 hours of flying time and that's it. You get some obnoxious reporter who's going to write a story that's stupid and not the truth anyway. They haven't changed any since then.
Yeah. You're an Uber driver.
So, we get cranked up and we had to fly up in the Trang and pick him up. We didn't know what it was. We just knew we were supposed to pick up this VIP at the operations shack up at 5th Special Forces in the Trang. So we fly up there and it's dark. And we were taxiing in, and the shack that I was supposed to pick these guys up at, totally dark. So I was thinking, they're not even out of bed yet. I got to get up early and go up here, and I'm a little ticked. I'm having to fly on my day off, and everything's going wrong, And I turn on the landing light. We're taxiing in, and we're maybe 30, 40 feet away from the shack, getting up pretty close. And I flip the landing light on and shine it over there. And sure enough, the door opens up on the shack, and these guys come out. And I can't show you here, but just by the way they were walking toward me, I looked at this guy and I keyed my flight engineer and I said, "Look who's coming." And the flight engineer says, "Oh my God." It's like, that's John Wayne.
It's John Wayne.
You could tell just by the way he was walking. And he was coming out and he was in regular fatigue, Army fatigues. And there was, 10 or 12 other guys with him. And I found out later they were, trying to think here, the Detroit Tigers, the baseball team? They were whoever the World Series champions were that year had come over with him. And I was on my mission sheet. We're supposed to pick these guys up and take them out to a number of places and then come back home with them late whenever they were done. So they got on board. We gave him a briefing and shook his hand. I'm all excited about it. Oh, I get to fly John Wayne today, So, and it was all classified document. You would think that told me. I thought I had reporters. That was just people we were supposed to pick up, and they didn't want anybody knowing that he was the one on board the aircraft. And I wasn't supposed to go ahead and clear on the radio or anything and say that we had these guys on board. So we take off, and as we climbing out, and we're supposed to go over to Bamituit with them, which is about an hour away. And on the way over there, there's before I get to there, as we get up to altitude, I did something really stupid, right? As an aircraft commander, you never allow anybody to fly the aircraft except a qualified pilot. That's rule number 1 in the Army. So you never let your flight engineer, your crew chief, or some civilian or anybody just jump in the cockpit and fly. Mm-hmm. You just never did that. Well, we get up to altitude, and I'm flying out there. I said, well, John Wayne, put him up here and fly. I told my co-pilot, I said, leave your helmet here and jump in the back and tell him to come on up here. So the crew chief, he talks to John Wayne, says, you want to fly the airplane? Oh, sure. So he comes up and sits down in the aircraft, and of course he's right there beside you. And big, he's a big fella. He was probably 6'6" and 250 pounds. He's a big man.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, he was a big fella. And he comes up and he's, do you know John Wayne very well? I mean, do you know the story of movies of him?
I know movies. I see his face. I can see his face.
He was a real rock star.
Yeah, superstar.
Balboa of his day. He was.
John Wayne.
He did all the patriotic movies, and he's a cowboy western, and he's a big hero.
He's huge.
He walked on water. As far as I can't believe it. I'm sitting here beside him. You know, and I'm actually get to meet him. So anyway, he sits down in the seat, and the aircraft's so loud you got to put a helmet on in order to talk to each other. One thing. So I motioned to him to put the helmet on. So I said, buckle in. So he buckled in first. And then he reaches up and he pulls his toupee off. I didn't know John Wayne wore a toupee. I'm looking at him like, what in the heck? John Wayne, where's the toupee? And he sticks it into the helmet bag beside him. And I said, okay, put the helmet on. So he puts the helmet on and pulls the mic around the front. And I introduced myself, and we start talking. He's just a down-home boy. And he asked me where I was from. And he said, well, I'm from Nebraska. He says, is that right? He says, I'm from Iowa. And Winterset, Iowa. Well, I know where that's at. That's just 200 miles from where my own is. So he grew up in there. He said, oh, yeah. So we BS'd about farming and all that. And I said, well, you want to fly the airplane? He looked at me and said, well, I don't know how to fly this thing. I said, what? John Wayne doesn't know how to fly an airplane. He's made all these World War II movies. Yeah. He flies airplanes all the time. Movie. So, I told him, the one in your left hand makes you go up and down. The one in the right hand, you'd go forward and back and left and right and all that. So he played around for a little bit, and we were doing that. And my door gunner in the back says, hey, he says, you want to come back here and shoot the machine gun? Like, yeah.
Holy shit.
Or as we're flying over to Bamituit, there was a free fire zone. There's the mountain range there that we always, every time we flew through it, we let the door gunners shoot. So they get some practice shooting the gun to make sure the guns work that day. So they usually fire off 30, 40 rounds and just call it a day. So he takes off his helmet, the co-pilot jumps back in, he goes back and gets on the that, and we're in motion. I said, okay, he's clear to fire. So I'm waiting, and we're flying through this thing, and we got about another 10, 15 seconds, and we're going to be out of the free fire zone. And I said to the door gunner, I said, what's going on back there? He says, well, you ain't going to believe this, sir, but John Wayne doesn't know how to shoot a machine gun. What?
Man,
where's the toupee? Yeah. Doesn't know how to fly an airplane. He doesn't know how to shoot a machine gun.
By the time you're landing, you don't like John Wayne anymore.
John Wayne's like, he's not 6'6", he's like a foot and a half. Taller he is. So that was kind of our day. We got into Bamituit, and he got out, and he went into the operations tent there while we refueled and stuff. And he came back out, and I said, well, what do you want to do? We had a mic cord on, and I said, what are we supposed to do here? And he said, well, he gave us the name of these fire bases around here. He said, I want to go out and meet these troops out here. So I said, oh, great. So we fly out there. He said, don't tell them I'm coming, because I don't want anybody to know I'm on if the enemy's out there, they'll bomb the place while I'm there.
Yeah, fuck yeah, kill John Wayne. Yeah, that's a propaganda coup.
I'm in there. And sure enough, we'd fly into places that we normally resupply out along the Cambodian border. And we'd just drop him off, and then we'd take off and go fly around for 15, 20 minutes. He'd get out. He'd just walk right up to these soldiers and introduce himself, and shake their hands. And it's like, good job. Thank you for being here. Thank you for your service, et cetera, et cetera. All day long. Never had a camera with him. Never had. He was there for the soldiers. He didn't want there for the story.
Yeah. That's cool.
And have a report done for him.
Yeah.
He got his character back. He was 6'6". But
I was about to say. I feel he's 6'6" now, right? Yeah, it's
a great situation. Mm-hmm. It's just a fun day to be with him the whole day, and of course the other guys, the baseball players. Of course, I didn't know who any of them were, but they were the same way. They were there for the GI and do that. Where a lot of times the USO show usually organized all and they'd come over and they'd do a show. So they were entertainers, but John Wayne, what could he do? Draw a gun and shoot it.
Yeah.
And he was there just to meet the guys and say, hey, hello, and thank you for doing.
Morale boost, I guess.
Morale boost, yeah.
Well, that's cool. I guess he earned his respect back, right? No, cause,
he on the way back.
He went back up. He went from 6'6" to Combat Ernie back to 6'6", right?
There you go. There you go. Now, see, Combat Ernie was probably the co-pilot sitting in the seat that day.
Combat Ernie was like, "Hey, do you want to get
out?"
Combat Ernie was probably Combat Ernie gets jealous, right? Because you're like, hey, John Wayne, do you want to fly a plane? And the door gunner's like, hey, do you want to shoot the door gun? Combat Ernie's probably like, hey, you want to go kill some Viet Cong? And they're like, Ernie,
well, let's go.
Ernie, press the brakes. Hey, do you want to go set off some claymores? Ernie, you're not allowed to meet John. Yeah, headline news: John Wayne killed by quote Combat Ernie.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah. I never got to fly a whole lot of VIP missions. If I did, they were press a lot of times. But I got to fly Miss Korea and a bunch of the runner-ups around. And the area that we were in was a lot of Korean soldiers, so they were there. So we took them around one day.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah, I'd watched a couple of the floor shows. The floor shows would last maybe half hour, 45 minutes. He'd come in, drop them, and they'd dance and sing and play, bands and songs and stuff. So I watched the first one and then flew them to the next place and got out and shut down the aircraft, and they're doing the same show over again. They just did the same thing. Well, after about watching them 3 times, screw that. I'll go back to the aircraft and get some sleep.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I'm laying there sound asleep. I feel somebody shaking my arm. I thought, well, it's time to get up. And here's one of the girls. And Korean girl, didn't speak a word of English, right? And she's looking at me and looking at me and checking me up. And she starts singing, "Beautiful, beautiful brown eyes." And I got blue eyes. She was trying to impress me with her. A beautiful brown eyes. A beautiful brown eyes.
Oh, birthday.
Yeah.
Me love you long time.
Then the last one I flew was just before I came home. It had been, I don't know, Christmas was 68 or 69 or 70. I don't know which one it was, but we flew up to Fenring and picked up Bob Hope and Ann Margaret and a bunch of the floor show, and we flew them up to another big Air Force base, and they did a show up there. But after the show, then the USS New Jersey was off the coast, and we were supposed to take them out there, but they didn't. It said only bring a small. Altogether, there was probably about 40 of them in the band and the singers and entertainers and stuff. So we loaded up Ann Margaret and Bob Hope and a couple of the other entertainers, and Ann Margaret's husband was with her. I wouldn't send her over there if I didn't go with her anyway either. Yeah. She was my wife.
Yeah. Jesus.
Pretty, Ann Margaret is, right? She's pretty hot. I don't know what the equivalent would be today, but Julia Roberts or somebody, real young movie star at the time. Very beautiful, great singer. She did Bye Bye Birdie, the movie. If you've seen that movie, that's an old movie too. You young kids, you don't know any of this stuff.
Dude, I haven't seen any movies.
Bye Bye Birdie, what's that?
I haven't seen any movies in my generation, man. People my age will say, Tommy, have you seen this? And I still, at 30 years old, I've never seen a Star Wars movie, a Star Trek movie.
You haven't?
No, dude, I live under a rock. I don't consume. I don't know. I think I'm too. What?
You do put your own movies in the podcast.
Yeah, putting out my own shit. Yeah, I'm. Honestly, I get. It sounds geeky, but that's why I read so much about the Cold War and stuff. Is I think it's so much more interesting than movies. Like, sure, you have a movie with dragons and wizards, but what about like CIA agents fucking with the railroads in northern Russia so that uranium? It's so much cooler.
Well, Dark 30. You've probably seen that movie then, right?
No, I've seen clips of it.
Yeah, no. That's where they...
Yeah, they go get Bin Laden, yeah.
Get Bin Laden, yeah. Anyway, So we load them up and we fly out to the New Jersey. And you can't land a Chinook. It's too big to land on the New Jersey. You got to just put your back wheels down on the landing pad.
Get out.
And get out, yeah. So, and then we took off and went back and refueled and came back out and got them. But the funny thing, her husband with her, and he was just, I thought he was drunk as a skunk, but in fact, what he was airsick. God, he was so airsick. He didn't, he got on that ship, and then I bet he got worse. And the time I brought him back, he was done puking. He couldn't puke any further. He was out, and that was a interesting story with him. But anyway, we brought them back in. But I got to fly Bob Hope one time too, so that was my claim to fame. Being I was a magnet ass in the company, it's the guy who had the magnet ass award is the one who's taken the most hits. Well, I'd been over there the longest, so I think I had taken the most hits of anybody in the unit by the time I got back there.
Is there any fear that you're going to be like flying?
A couple of the missions I've. Yeah, I think I told you the last time about the pilot, the F-100 pilot that bailed out.
Yeah, and you looked him up online.
Yeah, I hooked him up and drug him up on the winch and brought him up out of there. I keep hoping that he'll call me someday, but I imagine he's gone now. I'll never will get that phone call, but he's on one.
There's my great uncle Rich, my mom's uncle, died about 10 years ago. He was 18 on Omaha Beach. He was in not Vietnam. Sorry, he was in the FBI for like 50 years. But he was in World War II. I forget where they were. I think they were somewhere off like one of like the, I guess, like Nordic countries. I don't know what they were doing, but there was another U.S. ship that its engine broke or something. It's just something where it was just stuck, and so they had to go up like these huge like destroyers almost, and they had to go up and like
tow it up.
Well, they started with, they threw a rope just enough to make contact, and then they like strung something along on the rope, because a rope's not going to pull a destroyer, it's going to snap. So they kept throwing more and more until they could get them closer, and then they get like big chains, and till it's like, and basically you're pulling it by the anchor. But he was in like the early 2000s or something. He was in the airport, and I think my mom was with him. It might have been my grandfather, who was his brother. My grandpa and his brother. My grandpa married my grandma, and his brother married her sister. It was a weird, yeah. So, but I get just they
all drank kerosene, right?
I know, right? Then that's why I'm here. But kerosene drinkers. But right, but they were in the airport doing something, I forget what. But they ended up chatting with this like other guy who I think was wearing like a World War II veteran hat, and they got to talking. And after like 20 minutes of talking, it turns out that my uncle was the one who threw him the rope.
Oh, really?
Yeah. It's like 65 years later. They're both in their 80s. But they started whittling it down, and they started telling the story, and then next thing you know, apparently they were like, bullshit. And they were saying things that only they would know. And it was like, yeah. And then we, whatever, and we, it was just like, yeah, I threw you that. And I thought it was kind of cool. It was like 60 years later in New York City. Yeah. Kind of badass.
Well, that's what I was hoping, some reunion I'd go to someday and sit down at a table and start eating my pancakes, and guy'd sit down next to me and say, I got rescued in Vietnam, and
might still happen.
End up being the pilot.
It might. Hey, it happened to my great uncle when he was in. It happened to him when he was in his 80s. I don't know. It could still happen.
Yeah, isn't that cool?
You know what's going to happen is someone's gonna. We're gonna be doing our next episode. And someone's gonna come into the screen, and I'm gonna have Combat Ernie next to me.
Oh, that'd be great.
Combat Ernie's like, I'm not dead.
He's gone, but I always wondered what had happened to Combat Ernie if he'd have lived, because he got out. I was told he got out of the Army when he came home, and within 30 days after he got back, is when had his motorcycle wrecked. So,
damn.
Yeah. Poor guy.
Yeah. I've heard I think on Joe Rogan, he had on a pilot who was an F-4 Phantom pilot in Vietnam, and he talked about how a lot of them, when they came back, he's like, they started doing drugs. They joined motorcycle gangs because they're like, how do you come back to normal life? Because they're like, we would be flying these F-4 Phantoms. He's like, we turned the adrenaline up to 11 every day. He's like, we flew so low that he's like, there would be like stains and streaks from where they're hitting leaves. Yeah. And he's like, you come back, and a lot of the guys, and it's unfortunate, but they would turn to, methamphetamine, heroin, because it was like nothing compared. What are they go to a 9 to 5 after that?
Right.
Yeah. I kind of see that. Like, what do? It's either you're cursed with PTSD, or you come back and you're like, nothing, it's like life is
flying something else,
Yeah, you come back and it's like life is black and white now, and you just came back from like a color movie.
Yeah. Too many of them end up killing themselves doing that too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
what a waste.
Yeah, it is. It's. Do you ever miss it in the sense of there's just nothing like that, like flying a helicopter in a combat zone, or are you?
Oh yeah. It took a while to get used to. You just have to slow down.
Yeah.
The first couple of weeks, it's when you're back. I went from Vietnam. 48 hours later, I'm in Disneyland.
Jesus,
that's I flew into Seattle, and then I flew from Seattle down to Los Angeles, and the next day I'm at Disneyland, with my brother.
How do you even?
You just couldn't process what was happening. How this, it's like I'm pinching myself. Am I dreaming? Is this really happening? And you're so glad it was. You're glad this is real, but you couldn't comprehend this is really real.
Yeah.
It took a while to slow that down. It was lucky that I was with my family.
Mm-hmm.
And they engage you in a lot of things that get you back into reality, I think it was. But then I had left my car there, and I drove from there all the way back to Nebraska. And I had that, I took my time doing it, so it was probably a week or so that I was by myself thinking about what I had done.
Mm-hmm.
If it hadn't been for stopping to see, I stopped to see Las Vegas, the Grand Canyon, and then I had a friend in Albuquerque. He was going through school at the time, flight school at the time. So I stopped and seen him. He was my college roommate before I'd gone to Vietnam. So there was some steps along the way that brought you back a little bit to reality. When I got back to the farm, Dad put me on the tractor. It's like, my gosh, I've gone full circle here. I guess my flying story, I usually tell the story when I was driving a tractor 9 years old out on the cornfield. My dad had me cultivating corn, and this J3 Cub spray pilot comes by and just buzzes me, just And I looked up at him and I said, that's what I want to do. I'd rather fly than drive a tractor, That's when I first started, my first memory of this is what I want to be when I grow up, is be a pilot. Mm-hmm. And now after I'd gone through flight school and had all experiences in Vietnam and come back, I'm on that same tractor in the same field. And it was probably 3 or 4 years between the time, it'd been more than that, because I was 9 and I'm now 19 or 20. So it's like 10 years time anyway. From the time I'd driven that tractor to I wanted to be fly, or now I was already a pilot, and I'm back here driving a tractor again. And the reality of that finally hit me that, that was my dream.
Yeah.
And yet now I've experienced this, and I'm not sure this is what I really want to do anymore. I'd rather go fly for the airlines now and do something a little safer, but something that would make more money doing it, and I could make a career out of it. I didn't think I was going to make a career out of it in Vietnam, because I didn't think I was going to live that long.
Yeah.
So it was I don't know what, euphoric, a sense about you that this is reality and I'm home and it's over and I made it, so that was kind of,
yeah.
so I finally got through that. But then I still had to go back in the Army. I had accepted a direct commission over in Vietnam, so I wasn't a warrant officer anymore. I was a lieutenant. So I had to go back and go through infantry officer basic course, which was pretty stupid because I sent me down to Fort Benning for 2 months, and I shot a flare in the air and said, "Okay, soldiers, that's what a flare looks like." Well, I dropped tens of thousands of them.
Yeah.
We knew what a flare looked like.
Yeah.
There was probably 8 or 10 of us in the class that were already Vietnam veterans that had taken direct commissions, and we're in here with a bunch of second lieutenants that just got out of college that didn't know what a mortar round looked like or what a flare looked like.
Yeah.
You felt totally out of place doing that.
Yeah.
But you were back amongst soldiers again, and you seen that. Yeah, I got experience here that I can teach these guys. All of them were heading for Vietnam. They're scared, so you could tell them stories to scare them further if you wanted to, but you felt sorry for them because you're thinking, well, I've already been through this, so I can pass this on some of my experiences, and so that they'll have a little confidence in themselves too. And then I went from there back to flying again. I was, I flew for another, 21 years. So I flew another 12, 14 years before I ended up flying desk from that point on. I'd gotten too much rank, and I was getting too old by then. I was over 40. So, not too many pilots around unless you're a senior warrant officer flying at that age anymore. So that was my career. And that was, like, go back to your question though, do you have any regrets or whatever? No, I never had any regrets of anything I'd done, except that I wish that I stayed a warrant officer probably and just flew all my life. That would have been a lot better. But I had a lot of great experiences as a regular officer too. And I did get to fly for 21 years. So I was a major by the time I was in doing my last flight. But it was a lot of good times. Did a lot of different things, experiences. Like I said, ended up having a pretty good career doing other things as well. So I can't complain.
That's insane. Were you ever tempted to do something like, I don't know, like helicopters that go, like, they put out forest fires and stuff? Is there any sort of, were you ever interested in that?
Yeah, I was. And a lot of the Vietnam helicopter pilots, that's what they did.
Yeah.
There weren't a whole lot of commercial jobs. I mean, you got to realize there was probably 20,000 helicopter pilots looking for jobs at the time.
Yeah.
And there was probably 200 of them available.
Yeah. Yeah.
But my chances of getting that were slim to none almost. And if I stayed in the Army, I had a career ahead of me. And I had my goal set to get my 20 in and retire that. I ended up staying 30, but I'm living on a retirement pretty good from the Army now, where I'd have never had that if I'd have got out and got flying in the Forest Ranger or something, one of those jobs out there. Police department would have been another one. That's the only two places that you could have really had a job. A good friend of mine, he and I went through flight school together. He was an airline pilot before he got drafted. Got a job flying for an executive out of New York City. He flew Donald Trump every now and then.
Really?
But he didn't work for Donald Trump. He flew for a guy that had a helicopter that was like Donald Trump, and he got to fly a lot of VIP missions, and he had a really swanky. I mean, I got to ride with him one time. I mean, leather seat. I mean, it's insane what money inside the helicopter as there was on the outside. Beautiful, beautiful aircraft.
Now, do those have
right downtown, land right downtown New York City, right on the dock down there?
Yeah.
So that would have been a cushy job, but there wasn't too many of those around. He got it because his dad knew one of the guys that was one of the big kahunas up there, so that's how we got in. But that would have been an easy job there, and they probably paid more than being a firefighter. The thing is, with a firefighting job, they only hired you when there was forest fires. If there wasn't a forest fire, they laid you off, so you didn't have a consistent job. They paid you well when they needed you, but when they didn't need you, you were basically out looking for something else.
Did you know that the Pan Am building in New York? I forget what it was originally called. I think it was the original.
Had a heliport on the roof.
Yeah, they were actually, it used to be able to fly in there on a CH-47, but there was a crash, and I think it fell off the side, and they just iced it.
Stop that. Yeah, I used to fly into. You'd fly into. What's the airport there?
JFK.
Starts with G. No, the other one.
LaGuardia.
They fly to LaGuardia, and you could get on the Chinook there and fly it down to the Pan Am building. You were downtown. Of course, if you fly in first class from London to New York, you weren't going to drive a taxi downtown.
Not like the peasants, never.
You'd pay that $1,000 to ride the Chinook down there. So
hell yeah, man! Right down it takes 30 minutes to just get to Manhattan. Like it just to go across, and it's gridlock. Everything. Driving in there is the most anxiety-inducing thing ever. And then you'd see helicopters going to and from, and you're like, you're above it all, literally and figuratively. They're
probably making $100,000 an hour, and you'd lose that half hour in a taxi. You just lost $500,000.
Exactly. It's probably more.
Plane ticket, right?
Yeah, it's probably more cost effective. Yeah, you're right. They're probably saving money by. That's insane.
Sure.
Yeah,
sure.
That's there's a comedian, Brian Reagan, who talks about this is 20 years old, but it's like first class. He's like, they let them board first. So by the time us peasants are boarding, you're walking down the aisle and you see them all, and they're all on their laptops and they're looking at you and they're just, I'm making money right now. And you're just like, oh shit. Is for the private helicopters like Donald Trump or any other rich guy.
I was on air flight one time from Los Angeles to San Antonio. I was at Fort Sam Houston at the time, and I got bumped up to first class. I had a lot of frequent flyer miles, so I had 3 million miles, and the guy was sat down beside me. He picks up the telephone that's in the aircraft, and the whole time he's just chattering back and forth the whole trip for 2 hours, 3 hours between Los Angeles and San Francisco. And we landed, and I was taxiing in, and I said, "What do you do for a living?" He said, "I'm a stockbroker." And he said, I said, "Well," I said, "That's kind of an expensive phone call, isn't it?" And he says, "Oh, hell." He says, "I made a couple $1 million while I was riding this aircraft. The company paid for the phone, That kind of lifestyle, I had no clue what that was about.
Yeah.
And I'm sitting there making my $64 an hour. Yeah. He's racking up a couple million. I'm doing that,
Different realm, right? It's just a different stratification of wealth. Again, I don't know shit about cars, but I do know, very simply, right? You can go flashy Lamborghini, Ferrari, or you can go Rolls Royce, Bentley, and those are less. I mean, sure, they perform well, but it's less about what your 0 to 60, and it's more about it feels like you're riding on silk. With these expensive helicopters, did any of these billionaires or whoever was the actual ride different? Were they made in a way that just you rode it and you're like, oh, this is a smooth ride? As someone that knows helicopters.
Well, the one that Art and my friend flew had 6 blades on it. The top of the aircraft. The more blades usually, as long as they're synchronized and balanced, it's very smooth. I mean, if you could. And then of course the military doesn't put any soundproofing or any of that stuff in it. Where these commercial helicopters are all soundproofed, and they're just leather seats, and the whole works, and it's way more comfortable and a lot quieter and smoother than the military aircraft are.
I bet that'd be nice.
You don't even smell JP4 inside one of them. They're air conditioned and they got heaters in them and all that. It's like, God, that's all that luxury stuff you never had. And Chinook, you had a furnace in it, or your heater, so you could fly them in Alaska or places like that in the cold. But I've never heard of any that had air conditioner on. You just flew up to altitude and tried to find some cool air.
Guess that's simple enough.
It's in you. Yeah, but you didn't. The new ones now, they've got soundproofing and stuff in them, but in a situation where we were in, you just took all that stuff out. It's all extra weight.
It's extra shit, extra cost.
Extra weight and cost, and just stuff that could fly loose and get loose on you. So I never did fly a helicopter with any luxury on it. I would have loved to have had a job like that.
Would you ever like to whip around one of those stealth Black Hawks, like the ones they used in the Bin Laden raid?
No. I got on board.
You wouldn't like it?
I went out to the Lincoln Airport here one time, and there was 2 of them just coming in to refuel. Black Hawks, M models, or not Black Hawks, the Chinooks that are M models, which, 160th out of
160th SOAR, yeah.
Yeah, they're the only ones that have them. That's a special ops helicopter, and they have all kinds of crap in them I was surprised they let me go on board. The guys, I told them who I was. I was out there to pick up another passenger when they taxied in. And they come in and they're into the operations where I was at there to refile their flight plans and check the weather and stuff. And so I struck up a conversation with them. Said, hey, I used to fly one of those things as A model, so they befriended me right away and said, would you like to go see the inside? I said, darn right, to go see the inside of one. So he walked me out there, and I got to go through it and see all the different stuff. Of course, the technology is so far advanced from what I had in them, but I just couldn't believe. They got a big refueling probe on the front. They can refuel air to air. That's the only Chinooks that are built that do that. So they got to do a lot of things that I wouldn't have never got to do. Their radios were state of the art, of course, glass cockpit, GPS, all this gunnery and self-defense equipment on board with anti-flare devices. And it was amazing.
Yeah,
I would got to do that mission. That would have been a lot of fun.
For everybody listening, the 160th. It's SOAR, Special Operations Aviation Regiment, I think. They fly.
Out of Fort Knox.
Yeah, they fly Tier 1, so Delta and SEAL Team 6. They are what Mike Durant called. Yeah. They're the customer, Delta and SEAL Team 6, and you are the very fancy taxi. So they want to be dropped in Bin Laden's compound. You guys do it. It's
their outfit that does that. Yeah.
And they're the best of the best. They're like the Delta of. Did you ever debate trying to get in there?
Well, they didn't even have that kind of unit when I was in.
Okay, yeah, because it wasn't.
It wasn't formed. I'm not sure what year it was formed.
I think it was 80s.
I said it's probably been in the 80s, I guess. I was flying. Let's see. The 80s, I'd have been in Germany, I guess. So I was flying Black Hawks in Germany. So I don't even know as I heard of them until I'd come back and was at. I was at the Pentagon when I first heard that the unit even existed. So that would have been in the mid 80s, late 80s, I guess. They were flying Delta Force then, but. That's when I first heard about them. When they were the first unit in on Grenada, the Grenada invasion. And then, of course, they did Panama. That unit went down to Panama. So they got a pretty good reputation right away during that time period. And of course, then Afghanistan started and all this Navy SEALs, became pretty famous. They were extortion. What is it, the Extortion 19 mission? They lost 19 or 20 of them or something. That was it. That was in a Chinook.
Yeah, I know. Yeah.
It wasn't in a 160th hook.
Yeah.
It was one of the hooks out of Nebraska here. It was over there.
Yeah. They're Panama Operation Acid Gambit. Yeah, they went down to get Noriega, and one of the guys I've had on, the same guy, Del Comstock. Yeah, he was flown in. That was his first Delta mission. That was his first Delta mission. He was the breacher on the roof of Modelo Prison, where they went in to get CIA agent Kurt Muse. But yeah, no, it was 160th flew him in. Yeah, man, that's a Mike Durant. He wrote another book called Night Stalkers, and it's about how he first heard of it, and he was like, you just kind of heard these like whisperings, and you're like, what the hell is it? And there's just like this. You don't even get to try out for it. They invite you to come try out. So you just get like a piece of mail one day. And you're like, what the hell is this? And it's but it's always the most advanced stuff. You have to be the best of the best. But yeah, man, they talk about training accidents and stuff. Training to be in 160th. I mean, like, it was like not uncommon for someone to just hit a telephone pole, just blow up, game over.
Yeah. They train doing stuff that not many people get to even do.
Well, yeah.
They do a lot of night stuff.
Yeah.
You better learn to love to fly at night.
Yeah, that's what they said. Low altitude, high speed at night.
Yeah. I don't know what the selection process is. I never asked those guys, but maybe you know. I'm sure they all got to volunteer. I don't think that they just randomly pick people to put them in that.
No, they take the best ones, and then they have to come try out for it. Yeah. It's the most technically skilled pilots who can go do this hover, who can race in and pop up, who can. Yeah.
And who doesn't have a wife and kids?
Really, right? Because you're not
gone all the time. They have gone all the time.
Well, that's what he talked about in Night Stalkers. Is he was like, man, their divorce rate was so high because you couldn't say anything, and your beep would go off, and it'd be like, this is where we're going.
Yeah, the way they go. Yeah.
Yeah. And
my son, he flies C-17s, flew them from Fort Knox to Germany one time.
Oh, yeah?
A Chinook inside of a C-5.
Yeah.
He sent me a picture of this thing coming out.
Yeah, they fold them up, yeah.
Well, they take the blades off and the heads down and roll them in there. I guess they can put two of them inside of a C5. I've never seen that picture one or anything. But
you said does your son fly C-17s or C5s?
C-17s.
Has he flown a C5?
No, he doesn't want to either.
For everybody listening,
he said those things are on the ground more than they are in the air. They're always broke down.
For everyone listening, the C5 is just like the 747 of the military. It's the biggest. It can carry 2 Abrams tanks. It's just the biggest, intercontinental.
You open up the front and the back, you fly aircraft through it.
Probably good, dude. It's insane.
Figure out how to do it.
Whenever I drive up to Baltimore, DC from here, go by Dover. And once in a while, you'll see a C5 in the sky. You can know it's a C5 because it doesn't even look like it's moving. Yeah. It just
looks like it's bare.
You're like, what is that thing? You're like, is that a blimp? And it's just
overcast.
This big blob, and it's insane.
Have you seen one of these French built 380s yet?
No, I want to so bad.
Biggest airliner out there.
Yeah, Airbus A380. I want to so badly.
Yeah,
I want to see.
That thing is a monster thing. It makes the C5 look little.
Full length, double deck. That thing is. Yeah. I want to see one. I've never seen one. I've only seen a 747 a handful of times. I want to see. I would love to see an A380. Those things look so. I would love to see the Antonov 225.
Yeah, well, I was trying to think. Do they probably fly into Dulles? You're in Ocean City, you said, right? Mm-hmm. You'd have to go over to Dulles. You might be able to see one come in there.
I would love to. I would love to go on an A380. I'd love to get a luxury seat.
they fly into JFK as well, I think. I flew into Sydney, Australia a couple years ago, and there was 4 of them sitting there, turn around, and they got a terminal all by themselves, and they're 2 on each side of this thing. Like, God, that's about 2,000 passengers, when you
they have different variations. One variation was never built, but it was the A380-1000, and it was one that was supposed to be able to hold 1,000 people.
Yeah. God.
Have you ever seen there's an airline in the Middle East, Etihad, Etihad, and they have something called the Residence, and you have first class, and then you can get something called like an apartment, and it's where you actually have like your own sliding door and you have like a couch. But then there's something above that called the Residence, and there's only 2 of them per A380, and you have your own couch, TV, shower, and then you have this door, and there's like a little section of the cabin that's actually completely walled off. It's not like a partition, it's actually built in, and you get your own bed that you can close the door, and you have your own. I think that you have 5 minutes of hot water, so you can go take a shit.
What do you pay for that ticket?
I think it's like 48,000.
Yeah, so if you can afford that, you don't care about it, what it costs anyway.
Yeah. Again, you're probably making money, right? I'd love to get one of those.
Well, the king of Saudi Arabia and the 3 or 4 of the princes all own one, and they're private airplanes.
Yeah, the private A380s.
I was down in when I was at Fort Sam there in Sam Houston. They remodel them or restore or whatever they build them down there.
Yeah,
D. Howard has the contract. And I got one of the guys that went to church I went to worked on it. And he got me on board there one night. I was going out and they were doing a 747s when they first came out. And this 747, you know how it has the bubble on the top? They cut that bubble off and put a big plastic dome over the top of it. And there was a conference room in that room. So you could sit there holding a conference at 40,000 feet.
Holy shit.
Blue sky above you. That's what this is his little private airplane. He had a Rolls Royce, and he'd drive out into Rolls Royce, and the elevator would come down on the bottom of the aircraft. He'd drive up that thing and go right up into the airplane.
Holy shit.
He had a heart condition, so there was that OR on board the airplane. Regular, they could do heart surgery on him if they had to.
Jesus.
Amazing. There was more money inside the aircraft than what the aircraft itself cost.
Absolutely. Oh, yeah, no, the aircraft will cost a couple $100 million. Yeah, they'll put $1 billion into reformatting it.
Yeah.
Ooh.
Yeah, I've seen pictures of the aircraft on the inside since then, and some of the new ones that they built down there. I don't know if you've ever seen those, but
private,
it's like 12 bedrooms with their own bathrooms and showers.
King-size beds.
Conference room, lounge area. Oh, yeah.
Movie theater, bar. Yeah.
Ridiculous.
Yeah.
Ridiculous.
Man,
that's all.
Yeah, that's... You got that. There was the Antonov 225, the 6-engine... It's the Russian one. There's only one in the world, the Antonov 225.
Yeah. Big double.
Yeah. When it first came out, actually China might be signing a contract with Antonov to get like 10 of them for the military. But the original, obviously, it does like specialty transports and stuff. But when it first came out, because it came out and then it was to fly the Buran, the Buran, the Soviet space shuttle. But then right around then, the Soviet Union collapsed, and so they just had this one sitting in a scrapyard forever. And then they became like a capitalist company because they're like, we need to stay afloat. And it's just beauty of capitalism. They started doing all these specialty contracts. The point is right when they started, there was actually a proposal to turn it into a flying cruise ship, and it would have held 1,500 passengers, each with their own like little tiny apartment. It was going to have a movie theater, swimming pool, and it's funny because there's actually a documentary. This is the documentary from like the 90s, and you can see the guys from the Antonov Design Bureau, and they've grown up hearing capitalism is bad. So you can see them; they're all blushing like schoolgirls. They're like, we put the movie theater in here. They're like, oh, it's like so naughty. But it's this it was going to hold 15, but they decided not to. But 1,500. Point is, privacy. Are you still in contact with that guy? Does the private 747s and A380s? Could you get in contact with him?
It's been a long time. I'll have to do some. If I can hook you up with him, that'd be great.
Oh my God! Please.
Remind you, I got to hook you up with the submariner.
Yeah. I'll make a note of both of those. Submariner.
I can't even think of his name right now. He lives right up the street from where my son and daughter-in-law, or daughter and son-in-law live. They met him at Christmas. He's good friends with my son-in-law.
Please.
So you got the name there. But yeah, I think he just retired. He was going to retire in January or something like that. Can't remember now. But anyway, I'll get you his name and phone number. Sure, he'd be glad to talk to you.
The submariner or the
medic. He's a medic on a submarine. Yeah.
Yeah, I would love to talk to him. I would also really love if you can get that guy that worked on those private planes.
Oh yeah, down there. Yeah, it's been a long time since he may not even work for him anymore.
I don't care. He doesn't have to work for him anymore.
He can tell you about it. Yeah.
Please put out your tentacles. See if you can just get in contact with him.
Yeah.
It's fine if he doesn't want to. I get it. It's fine.
Yeah.
I would love to talk to him. I would love that. Private 747s.
One of the cool things about, he had this bar, right? And we're walking there, and all these glasses are sitting on this glass shelf, and all those gold lined, everything was gold lined and everything. And I said to the guy, well, how do you keep those glasses on that shelf when you take off and stuff? They just fall right off. He says, throws a little switch, and there's a magnet. They're all magnetic.
Electromagnet?
Yeah. So just turn them on.
Fuck.
I bet that switch is on the checklist too. What do you bet?
I bet you. You can't have that glass falling around shattering on your billionaire clients.
Imagine taking off and forgetting to throw that. All your glasses.
You'll end up dead in a ditch. Can't have these billionaires looking like fools in front of their clients.
Imagine the Air Force One. Of course, they have a kitchen aboard and on that in the dining room, but I don't know what the situation is there. The Air Force feeds that,
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, the Air Force One is, I don't think it's necessarily, I mean, I think it's pretty luxurious. I don't think it's luxurious in the sense of these private places. I think its attraction is they just put in so many defense measures, communications, encrypted communications, so it can act as a flying Pentagon. It can, it's got all the anti-air or missile defenses.
Probably 2 bedrooms and that's it,
Yeah, no, the president's is his bedroom's I never knew this. His bedroom's at the nose of the plane. It's because that's the quietest spot.
It's underneath, underneath the cup.
Yeah, it's the quietest spot.
Yeah.
And
I've never been up there, so I don't know.
I would love to. Well, you
I've never flown first class in a 747.
I've never been in a 747. I would love to.
You haven't?
No, and they're retiring most of them. I know. I think there's only a handful left.
Yes, there's not too many left flying. Most of them are cargo planes now. And
they're retiring the A380s already. It just wasn't a successful business, Finn. I mean, it was, but it wasn't. I think COVID was the death knell.
Yeah, it's the SST. You think they get those flying? Get
Conquered,
some, Boeing's got a beautiful drawing of one. They've never built one because they're just not efficient.
But there's got to be some billionaire out there who would rather have a Concorde than a 747. Because if time is money, you're going to want to be going Mach 2.
Surprised Elon Musk doesn't own one of them.
I know, right? Because really, if time is money. And you can go Mach 2 over the ocean,
Yeah, but see, now you can do all your business while you're flying. You don't have to be over there.
That's
to
true.
Do that anymore. So, yeah.
I imagine with a
Speaking of which, Isn't it? Is it today or tomorrow? What is today? 15th, 16th, 18th is when he's landing that one on Mars.
No, that's not. That's NASA. That's NASA.
Well, yeah, but it's his aircraft is doing it. He built that thing.
Really?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure. Yeah, the thing weighs 2 tons. It's a 2-ton robot.
Yeah, it's a rover. Yeah, Perseverance.
Rover. Yeah. I thought he built it. Maybe it's his rockets that are shooting it.
Probably his rockets, because the rovers are built by NASA JPL. I've had on the head of NASA JPL before, Rob Manning. I think it was episode 208 or 210.
His last 2 didn't do so good.
Yeah, you can't win with them all. Hey, you're trying to hit a hole in one on a different planet.
Oh yeah. Well, that one that he's sending up all these
satellites,
high-speed internet ones.
Mm-hmm. Starlink. Yep.
And I think the 19th one is going up there. But can you imagine you're out in the middle of the ocean, 10,000 miles from nowhere, and you got high-speed internet.
High-speed internet. Hell yeah. I mean,
guy's got a dream, yeah.
Dude, he is so inspirational because he changes the world how he wants to see it changed.
Yeah.
I mean, to me, there's no greater role model than dude, that is a guy that's changing the. You want electric cars? You want self-driving cars? Make them. You want rockets to land? Make them. You want internet in the middle of nowhere? That's the guy to do it.
I can do that. Yeah, first time I saw this rocket come back down and land on this little pod.
Yep.
There's a circle, and he hits the dead center of that circle. It's like, whoa, is this a movie or animation, or is this real?
I mean, we're watching he's a living like Da Vinci. I think these guys are like once every 500 years.
Yeah.
Right?
He's way ahead of his time.
Yeah.
And he's making money doing it. God.
Richest man in the world.
Yeah.
He passed Bezos a couple weeks ago.
Yeah.
Do you think so? That book I told you about, Raven Rock by Garrett Graff, there's a chapter on 9/11, and he interviews a bunch of police officers from Sarasota, Florida, who were, because obviously Bush was told about the plane hitting the World Trade Center while he was reading that book in Florida, right, or that middle school, and they rushed them over to the airport. They get on. I didn't know this. They actually they checked everyone getting back on, even though they'd already been checked, because they were so freaked out. They took everyone's phones. No one's allowed to bring a phone on. It was, and the pilot, his last name's Tillman. He said he had all the engines going, but he just had the brakes on. Point is so there was a reporter on the plane who talked about, she thought they were like hit by a missile or something, because they said they took off, and she said we went vertical. I was stuck in my seat. And when I first heard that, I thought it was probably just an exaggeration, right? It's probably adrenaline, 9/11, what's going on? Well, there's also, Garrett Graff also, I had Garrett Graff on here as well, but he talks about interviewing the Sarasota police officers who were there, who, they like opened the gates, let them in, let the Secret Service, and then closed it. They said when they saw it take off, they thought something went wrong because it went vertical through the clouds. Not at an angle, vertical, 90 degrees.
Right up. Yeah.
And one of the women on the plane, I guess there was someone else there, like a Secret Service member, who I guess there are some that are just always stationed on the plane. And he turned to her and said, as they were in their seats going up, said there are only 2 planes in the world that can do this, and they're both Air Force One. And I had always suspected that something like that had to have existed, but it would be highly classified. But apparently it does exist. It's only been used once, aside from in testing. It's only been used once, and it was on September 11th, 2001, taking off from Florida. It's a RATO or a RATO or JATO, jet assisted takeoff.
Jet assisted takeoff.
Yeah. And then RATO is rockets, like C-130s will do that when they're taking off from like. Yeah, so it's for everybody listening. It's you can look up RATO, Blue Angels, the big whatever the big C-130 or the Blue Angels is.
The C-130 has a JATO.
What is it? It's Huey or Herbie. It has some nickname, but it's painted like the Blue Angels.
Yeah, what is the name? Not Herbie.
Fat Albert? Is that it?
Yeah, Fat Albert. That's it.
Yeah.
It's
It's got rockets in it.
Yeah, it's kind of, and they do it every air show.
Yeah.
They come out, they take off. I mean, it's pretty cool. You ever seen it?
Not in real life, but I've seen the videos. Yeah, for everybody listening, Google Blue Angels RATO, RATO, and you can see this takes off and then just
big flames come out of the back.
It looks like a dragster. It looks like a hot rod, and it goes. I mean, it goes at a steep angle and then it levels out, and it's for like emergency. Obviously, this is an air show, but apparently, Air Force One has it, and it's. The only mention of it I can ever find is in Raven Rock. I've never been able to find an article about it. It's obviously classified, but they thought that they were at imminent danger, so they just flipped it, and they're like, well, you can be at 40,000 feet in like 2 minutes, which is insane. A 747 going vertical.
He was up there.
There's another weird piece of information.
Well, four F-16s picked him up once he got up there too, didn't he?
Mm-hmm.
4 F-16 picked him up and flew him over to Barksdale.
Mm-hmm. They went to Offutt.
That'd been fun.
Yeah, it's the only time that Air Force One's ever had.
Well, he went to Barksdale first.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And then, he went to Barksdale or Whiteman, and then he flew up to Omaha and then back to D.C. that night. So.
Mm-hmm. And they weren't telling any of the air bases that they were coming in case that they were under attack. So. They told Offutt, I think, like 5 minutes out, Offutt was told to be prepared for like a VIP. They had no idea it was Air Force One. George Bush actually tells a story of how when they landed at Offutt, they had a Humvee waiting, so that Bush never actually had to get off Air Force One. He just went through like the turret, and they had an up armored Humvee, and that took them right to the hangar, and then they went into a bunker under Offutt. But Bush says the most danger he felt on all of September 11th was in the back of that Humvee, because the guy who was driving it was just like an 18-year-old guy. And mind you, no one on Offutt knew that Air Force One was landing, let alone this kid. So he gets sent to go out there and pick up someone in an up-armored Humvee in case there are snipers. He gets in, he turns around, and he sees George Bush. He said the kid was having a panic attack. He was flooring it, and apparently one of the Secret Service members like put his hand on the kid's shoulder and was like, slow down. He was like, because by then everyone knew that the World Trade Center collapsed. The Pentagon had been hit, so no one knew what was going on. But another interesting factoid from that is, they had a 4 fighter jet escort, and obviously fighter jets only have so much fuel. So as they're going, across the nation, a couple more would come up, and then these ones would drop off. And so they had this running escort. But there's I think it's like a New York Times article. It's from like 2005. You can find it online. The pilots apparently were radioing into Air Force One. The pilot, again, his name's Tillman. His last name's Tillman. And they were saying, can you slow down a little bit, because we're on afterburners and we can't keep up? Which begs the question, how fast can Air Force One go? I don't know, right? Because if you had ever said, I bet I can take off vertically, people would say you're retarded. But then 9/11 happens and you have multiple reports of Air Force One going vertical. If you have fighter pilots saying we were going on afterburners and we couldn't keep up, does that mean what? What does that mean? I mean, is Air Force One capable of supersonic flight? Does it have reinforced wings so that it... Who knows? But I don't know. I get excited, if you can't tell. I get really excited.
Yeah, well, I guess that would be... I wouldn't think an F-16... I mean, I wouldn't think a 747 could outrun an F-16 any day, But F-16 can do Mach plus, you know. So,
but you have to think, you would also not... Yeah, I'm with you. But you would also not think a 747 can fly vertical. But if that happens, you have to start wondering, what the hell else is this thing capable of?
Yeah. Well, there's no way it could fly Mach 1.
No, because they would break up the wings.
Because of the wings, they'd have to sweep back to do that.
Maybe it goes swept wing. Who knows?
You probably get up to 690, though.
Yeah, you just
99%.
You get that condensation dome. It's right on the front. They keep it right there. It's just like right under the bang. I don't know, man.
Yeah.
You got to think,
Yeah.
what can it do?
Surprised that they do. They keep them all armed, and I guess all those bombs and the guns are ready to go. But I doubt that they load them very often with the real stuff, unless they're out on a range training that day, that those guys get a fire. That you'd think, well, down there in little old Macon, Georgia, they would have a 500-pound bombs they could load on the thing, but they must have.
Yeah. It's we got to wrap this one up in like 5 minutes because I have another guy on after this. But another quote from George Bush is it wasn't until September 11th, 2001 that I realized just how many crop dusters are in America, because they told everyone to land, right? Well, a lot of these crop dusters, really just out in the middle of nowhere, these guys didn't have radios. They're flying at an altitude of 40 feet. They're just like, but apparently all the time, because Air Force One was going over the country, they were like, bogey, and they'd find out. And next thing you know, a crop duster would land and some guys with suits would get out and they'd do a background check and it would just be like Bob Smith, he's half in the bag flying his crop duster. Yeah, he doesn't have news. He's like, what the hell's going on? But apparently Air Force One all day they were like, bogey, and they were like, oh, it's just this crop duster out in the middle of nowhere. Just
everybody was grounded otherwise.
Yeah, well, it's a lot like Independence Day, right? The drunk dad, the crop duster guy. Apparently there were just a bunch of crop dusters.
Did you ever see the video of how FlightAware has every flight, airplanes in
the time lapse?
And this was at Smithsonian where I seen it, where they called them all off, changed them, ground them. And then all those little dots, they just start to disappear and disappear.
There's none.
There's probably like 5 of them left, and then those are gone.
Yeah.
It's like,
and then there's
that would never happen.
Yeah, there are photos in Canada of just 747s like tip to tip because they're all just forced down.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Yeah, they've actually during this COVID, they've got all these planes were grounded too. They've got runways all over this country where the aircraft are parked at, and they're all out on the runways, all bumper to bumper, wing to wing, nose to nose. Hundreds of them just parked out there. You think about how many millions of seconds those guys are losing not flying those airplanes.
I mean, how much the whole world is losing.
Yeah, I don't know I haven't heard, but what percentage of the airline industry has recovered yet? How many are flying versus how many they have?
It's insane.
I haven't flown. Have you flown since 9/11 or since COVID started, restrictions?
I've been out of my house like 5 times. I've left like this area. I went up for Christmas and Thanksgiving to New Jersey, but no, I haven't flown.
Yeah. Yeah, I haven't got out of here either. So I'm going to fly out to D.C. March probably the 1st or 2nd. I haven't bought the ticket yet, but we've got one of our flight engineers is dying of cancer, and he's got 3 to 6 months left. And I was talking to him on the phone. And I said, Roy, what's your last wish? I said, have you thought about that? What, He said, I'd love to just sit behind a Chinook and run it up and shut it down again one more time as a flight engineer, So I just kind of hung up the phone and got to thinking about that. So I called up a buddy of mine I know that's still flying them. And he says, well, I don't know. We'll give it a shot. Send me a letter. So I sent him a letter. And he sent it up the chain of command, and it got up to the general of 1st Aviation Command there in Fort Knox. And it stopped there, so I didn't think nothing came back down. So he called me up one night and said, hey, he says, do you know any generals that can send him a letter? So guys I knew that are retired generals, one of the guys down in Oklahoma sent him I wrote the letter. General signed it, sent it up there, said, hey, this guy's dying. He's got a last wish. And this is the best public relations, blah, blah, blah. Story you could ever possibly get. Here's an old Vietnam guy. He's dying, man. All he wants to do is
put him in the fucking helicopter.
Start up an aircraft,
Get that shit going.
Make it happen, doggone it. Well, sure enough, weeks later, it's happening. All I got to do is Roy's got to live that long, you know.
Come on, Roy.
Wheelchair or something. I said, you ain't dying until we get this mission
You don't
done.
have permission to die, Roy.
Anyway, I'm going to fly out there, I think, and I told Roy, he said, well, if I'm going to be in the back, I said, I want you in the front so we could relive the whole day. I said, well, I'd probably make that happen. I said, I'll have to read it. All I got to do is read the checklist.
Yeah.
You're the one that's got to do all the work.
Oh, yeah.
So I'll sit in the cockpit and read the checklist, and we'll crank up a Chinook and shut it back down again for good old Roy so he can do that.
Hell yeah. It's the
That's I didn't think about doing it myself. I was just making it happen for him, and then we got to talk about this, and boy, I think now we've got about 15 guys that are old alumni in the unit that are going to drive down there and jump on the Chinook and crawl over it and get to see some of our old stuff, see what the new ones are. So
that's beautiful.
be a fun weekend.
That's beautiful. Yeah. How stupid would you have to be to not take that PR stunt?
Yeah. Yeah.
More.
Yeah. Well, the thing is, there's probably a lot of guys got a dying wish like that.
Sure.
In the Army.
Yeah.
No way they can do it, but this is going to happen, my gosh. So that's pretty cool.
I mean, Jesus, why don't they just put one?
Officially, it's a recruiting mission. They're going to land on a high school football field, which is like a mile from his house. And they're going to do the recruiting. And then this guy just going to happen to show up and they'll be there when they crank up to get ready to leave.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
It'll work.
That's beautiful.
It'll be fun. Neat story.
Beautiful. Roy does not have permission to die.
No. We might rename him Combat Ernie by the time it's over with, but it will make it happen. Combat Ernie just happened to show up.
Combat
Let me
Ernie.
start this thing.
They're like, everybody's like, oh, fuck it.
Try to light the fire. Let's go,
Everybody's like, Ernie, don't do it. Ernie's like, we're going to Quezon. It's like, Ernie, the war's over.
Yeah. All right. Well, you got to run, huh?
Yeah, I got to run. I got another guy in 20 minutes. John, thank you so much for coming on, man. It's always a pleasure.
I think you're right like mine,
Do I what?
You got to do another.
Yeah, we got to do another one. We're setting up another one. Let's set up Combat Ernie.
No, I mean, you got another one today.
Yeah, I got another one in 22 minutes, yeah.
Jeepers.
Yeah. Hey, man,
Go to the bathroom and get a good drink.
I'm going to the bathroom. I'm going to go get some food. Hey, man, I have the opportunity to turn this thing into a living. I am not going to waste it by doing one every other day. I'm going to do 2 a day until this thing takes off. I got an opportunity to make it work, man. I'm going to make it work.
Good luck.
Thank you very much, sir.
Wish you all the best.
Thank you, John. John, always a pleasure to have you on. I'll, like I said, I got another one right now, but I will text you, and let's set up a Combat Ernie episode.
Outstanding. All right.
Thank you so much. God bless, sir. Bye-bye.
Bye.